Chapter 1551. Earth Blood Cauldron. As this thought flashed through his mind, Bagushidu grimaced, his face turning ghastly pale. His aura fused with the Earth Blood Cauldron. In that instant, he sensed that the Earth Blood Cauldron that had been passed down for hundreds of years, had actually split open at a speed visible to the naked eye right under his nose. Furthermore, the crack was still expanding. No, this can't be. Bagushidu's eyes went round in disbelief. These three ritual tools of the Earth sect were sturdy and powerful, and even the best of weapons would find it impossible to leave a scratch on them. This was because the Earth Blood Cauldron had been forged from materials that the Earth sect of the Solar Holy Mountain had expended the strength of the entire Turkic Khaganate over decades to gather from all over the world. They were already extremely rare materials, and many supreme experts of the Earth sect had also added many secret arts and seals to them. In Bagushidu's understanding, these ritual tools were indestructible. But Bagushidu had never imagined that a single strike from Wang Chong would be able to leave a crack in the Earth Blood Cauldron. Although it was only a short crack, Bagushidu's heart felt like it was about to split open. Ha ha, Bagushidu, you're getting happy too early. All you're relying on is the Earth Blood Cauldron. Once I destroy your ritual tool, let's see what else you can rely on. At this moment, a voice resounded through the world, shattering the silence. Nearby, Wang Chong also saw the change in Bagushidu's Earth Blood Cauldron, and Wang Chong's eyes instantly brightened. The Origin Immortal Sword was actually able to counter Bagushidu's Earth Blood Cauldron? This was an unexpected discovery for Wang Chong. Wang Chong had originally been relying on the fact that he had recovered all his energy, gotten rid of all his hidden injuries, and the enormous energy contained in the Origin Immortal Sword, so he was not afraid of fighting to the death with Bagushidu. But this discovery was a massive harvest for Wang Chong. Bagushidu, let's go again. With a strange look in his eyes, Wang Chong howled. Before Bagushidu could attack, he gathered up all his stellar energy and the surrounding Origin energy and shot forward like a bolt of lightning at Bagushidu. Bang! There was a heaven-shaking boom as a white bolt of lightning flashed between the two. This time, Wang Chong remained motionless, but Bagushidu was forced back several steps by the enormous pressure. Cack-lack! The cracks on Bagushidu's Earth Blood Cauldron were originally only as thick as a strand of hair, but after the second blow of the Origin Immortal Sword, they had not only lengthened by 6 to 7 inches, but also widened and became more and more obvious. It seemed like Wang Chong's sword would cleave through it in just a few more blows. Impossible! This is impossible! I can't! Bagushidu was flabbergasted. Just 2 blows from Wang Chong's sword had left him in an indescribable shock. His entire world had collapsed. Wang Chong's sword had not only cleaved apart the Earth Blood Cauldron of the Earth sect, but it had also cleaved apart the deeply rooted belief in his heart. Even more serious was that these 3 Earth Blood Cauldrons were his life-bound artifacts, and Bagushidu's energy and Yuan's spirit had fused with them. As the Earth Blood Cauldrons split apart, Bagushidu's energy began to leak out, and his powerful strength began to drop. Bagushidu, hand over your life. Now is the time for you to pay the price. At almost the same time, 2 furious storms of energy shot out from the fog and lunged at Bagushidu. Myriad energies returned to the Origin. Yangren Divine Art. With 2 furious roars, the evil emperor and the chief of Wushang joined the fray. Up ahead, Wang Chong's eyes were bright as he swung the Origin Immortal Sword at Bagushidu. The space on these 2 chains was narrow and limited movement. Not even Bagushidu would be able to dodge this pincer attack. Bastard! Bagushidu was both shocked and infuriated. At this moment, he no longer had any of his previous grace and composure. So what if you have the Origin Immortal Sword? Even if I have to be heavily injured, I'll still kill you and your disciple. Being forced into desperate straits by Wang Chong's group of 3 had forced Bagushidu to unleash his monstrous, killing intent. sundering earth and collapsing mountains. Bagushidu's eyes flashed with cold light as he used one of the strongest techniques of the earth sect. Rumble! The earth cracked and the mountains collapsed. Under the influence of an invisible force, the entire cave trembled violently, as if it would collapse at any moment. The 3 cauldrons on Bagushidu's body also shot forward, transforming into a triangular formation that slowly revolved around Bagushidu. At the same time, Bagushidu poured more stellar energy into the earth blood cauldrons, causing them to explode with energy as vast as 3 mountains. Boom boom boom. The attacks of the trio continued to strike at Bagushidu, but they were immediately stopped by the powerful fortress formed by the earth blood cauldrons. Jumping clowns, I'll kill you first, and then I'll kill that brat. Bagushidu was infuriated by this 3-pronged attack. As he used the earth blood cauldron to block the trio, Bagushidu's eyes chilled. Without the slightest hesitation, he turned around and clawed at the Wushang village chief and demonic emperor old man behind him. Kree! The air howled as Bagushidu's black stellar energy transformed into blood-red pythons, their faces savage and steely as they howled and lunged at the pair. Earth blood pythons. Bagushidu's move was another supreme technique of the earth sect. The earth blood python formed from stellar energy was as tough as steel and as sharp as a divine weapon. In a chaotic battle between top-class experts, it was extremely effective at piercing through stellar energy and could break through an opponent's stellar energy. Bagushidu had relied on this technique to defeat all his competitors on the Solar Holy Mountain and become the Earth Sect Master. One could easily imagine how powerful he was. Wang Chong was currently at his peak, but the evil emperor and the chief of Wushang were far from the same. Moreover, the 2 of them did not have divine swords, so they were still lacking compared to Bagushidu and his earthblood cauldrons. As long as Bagushidu could capture these 2, he could use them to threaten Wang Chong. When the time came, the Origin Immortal Sword and the treasures on the altar would naturally fall into his hands. Old Village Chief, let's use that move together. Behind him, the demonic Emperor Old Man only needed a glance to understand Bagushidu's intentions. But as Wang Chong's master, the evil emperor had his own pride. In the face of Bagushidu's attack, the evil emperor's expression darkened, and he showed no intention of backing down. That's all we can do. On the other chain, the chief of Wushang's white hair fluttered in the wind. With just a few words, he had understood the evil emperor's intentions. During this period of time, the 2 of them traveled together and constantly exchanged what they had learned in martial arts. At the same time, they explored higher realms. Although the 2 of them were still unable to break through to the nuance realm, they managed to figure out a combination ultimate technique. This technique had been derived from the subtle realm energy that Kuteba had used. It was a secret art that combined the strength of 2 people to open the subtle realm. The conditions for using this secret art were extremely harsh. 2 people had to have an extremely high level of cooperation and reach the half-step subtle realm at the same time. But even so, this technique was still rather immature. Because it was a trick and not one that had truly reached the subtle realm, there was a high chance of failure, and there was also a chance that the user would suffer a backlash. The chief of Wushang and the evil emperor had originally estimated that they would need another 3 or 4 months to complete this technique, but they had no time to worry about such things. Universe reversal, Grand Void enters the subtle. At almost the same moment, the chief of Wushang and the evil emperor clasped their left and right palms together while their free hands shot toward Bagushidu. Bang! The place where the left and right palms of the evil emperor and the chief of Wushang clasped together began to glow like a blazing sun, exuding dreadful ripples of energy. In the depths of space and time, rumbling sounds could be heard. Under the effect of this invisible power, another space and time suddenly opened up at this moment. The evil emperor and the chief of Wushang were able to use their combined strength to break through the spatial barrier and open up a path to the subtle realm. At the same time, the vast energy of the minute subtlety realm surged into their bodies at an astonishing speed. How could this be? Bagushidu could sense that the two of them had both entered the subtle realm and their stellar energy had swelled to a new level. His body trembled in shock, his eyes brimming with disbelief. The martial path was a solitary cultivation, and the stronger one was, the more difficult it was to rely on external objects to break through. Bagushidu had spent several years refining these 3 earth blood cauldrons, and he had paid a heavy price. Moreover, he had relied on external objects to break through the subtle realm, not his own cultivation. Bagushidu was still half a step into the subtle realm, still lacking that final step. For the evil emperor and the chief of Wushang to work together to break through the barrier and enter the subtle realm without any external objects was simply unimaginable. Rumble! Bagushidu didn't have time to think before their attacks collided with Bagushidu's earth blood python with a thunderous momentum. Awo! Chapter 1552. Bagushidu, you dare! But before Bagushidu could strike while the iron was hot, a furious roar came from behind him, a thunderous roar that seemed capable of shattering space itself. Wang Chong gripped the Origin Immortal Sword, his eyes turning red and his body exploding with killing intent. Rumble! As Wang Chong swung his sword, Wang Chong's Origin Immortal Sword seemed to respond to Wang Chong's thoughts and exploded with dazzling light. Not even Wang Chong noticed that a brand new energy imbued with the power of a law had fused into Wang Chong's stellar energy. Bagushidu paled as he sensed the terrifying rage and killing intent coming from Wang Chong's body, a hint of panic appearing in his eyes. There was no time to think, and Bagushidu was forced to give up on capturing the chief of Wushang and the evil emperor. Instead, he gathered all the power of the 3 earth blood cauldrons and smashed them at Wang Chong. 3 cauldrons in the air. Bagushidu formed a spell with his right hand, and the 3 cauldrons began to rumble and rumble, the air around them seeming to crumble and collapse. In the next moment, there was an earth-shattering noise. Golden light filled the air as the 2 destructive forces collided violently like comet. So strong! The moment the 2 energies collided, Bagushidu felt his shoulders sink as if a mountain had smashed into him, and his entire face paled. He could clearly sense that this was a full-strength attack from Wang Chong, but this one was even more powerful and terrifying. Each blow of the Origin Immortal Sword was stronger and more difficult to block. Kaklak! Kaklak! Bagushidu was both shocked and infuriated. With each blow of Wang Chong's sword, a crack would appear on the earth blood cauldrons, and these cracks would grow larger and longer. What Bagushidu found most unacceptable was that these damages were irreparable. The supreme ritual tool of the Earth sect, which had been passed down through the generations, had remained unscathed for several hundred years, and yet it had suffered such irreparable damage at his own hands. Bagushidu simply could not accept this. Earth blood curse. In his fury and shock, Bagushidu's hatred for Wang Chong seeped into his bones. Without the slightest hesitation, Bagushidu immediately used a powerful forbidden art of the Earth sect that specialized in controlling curses. This technique required the sacrifice of a certain amount of essence blood and primordial spirit to strengthen the 3 earth blood cauldrons. After using this move, one would need to recuperate for at least 3 to 5 months in the future. Furthermore, it would cause irreparable damage to one's spirit and consciousness. The power of the magic tool would also decrease in the next year or so. But Bagushidu had no time to worry about such things. As long as he could eliminate Wang Chong and deal with this powerful foe, it would all be worth it. Moreover, if he didn't stop Wang Chong, the 3 earth blood cauldrons would really be destroyed by his hands. Plush! Bagushidu bit down on the tip of his tongue and sprayed a mouthful of essence blood mixed with pure stellar energy onto the 3 earth blood cauldrons. King of foreign lands, this king will have you die. Bagushidu stared at Wang Chong, his fury raging in his heart. But just when he was preparing to use his blood as a sacrifice to communicate with the blood runes on the Earth Blood Cauldron and activate the Earth Blood Curse to kill Wang Chong, Bagushidu's mind was thrown into disarray by something unexpected. Buzz. Without any warning, the energy on the 3 Earth Blood Cauldrons fell into chaos. Bagushidu's blood was unable to seep into the cauldrons. Not only that, Bagushidu had already made the 3 Earth Blood Cauldrons impregnable, and he had relied on the enormous energy contained within them to break into the dark radiant heaven, giving him strength on par with the subtle realm. But at this moment, the power of the 3 cauldrons had gone completely out of control, and the countless Earth Sect masters had spent so much effort to carve them had lost their effectiveness. Without the help of the 3 Earth Blood Cauldrons, Bagushidu felt like his body was empty. Before he could react, his strength began to recede, dropping from the subtle realm to the half-step subtle realm. How could this be? Bagushidu screamed as he swiftly retreated, his face ghastly pale. He no longer had that disdainful and proud demeanor that seemed to control the entire situation. How could this be? How could the Origin Immortal Sword have this kind of ability? Bagushidu's mind was in turmoil as he stared at the Origin Immortal Sword in Wang Chong's hand like he was looking at a ghost. He had gathered a great deal of information on the Origin Immortal Sword, but he had never heard that this immortal sword could interfere with ritual tools and render them useless. This was beyond Bagushidu's understanding of divine swords. This Origin Immortal Sword was inconceivably powerful, far surpassing the ritual tools of the Earth Sect. Bagushidu's face was ghastly pale. For the first time, he felt like he couldn't win against the Origin Immortal Sword wielding Wang Chong, and he even felt a tinge of fear. How could such a divine sword exist in the world? With this immortal sword here, my magic treasures won't be of any use at all. I have to leave. Bagushidu had always harbored a deep desire for the Origin Immortal Sword, but this time, he finally began to think of retreating. One Wang Chong, the evil emperor and the chief of Wushang. In the past, he would have had nothing to fear, but now that the Earth Blood Cauldron was being countered by the Origin Immortal Sword, Bagushidu could no longer deal with 3 top-class half-step subtle experts at the same time. Bagushidu, do you think you can leave? Wang Chong's eyes were as sharp as lightning as he had long ago seen through Bagushidu's intentions. But Bagushidu was a man who hid a dagger behind his smile. Whether it was for himself or for the Tang dynasty, Wang Chong could not let him escape so easily. Void movement technique. Wang Chong's body swayed as he pushed the void movement technique he had learned from the man in black to its limit. His body rapidly approached Bagushidu, his 2 hands gripping his sword as he swung it down at Bagushidu with a momentum that could cleave apart the heavens. Boom boom boom. Stellar energy exploded and gales howled through the air. In the distance, Wang Chong and Bagushidu were locked in a fierce battle, the chains beneath their feet clattering and shaking as if they would fall at any moment. On the chains, Wang Chong's attacks rained down on Bagushidu. In the face of Wang Chong's terrifying attacks and the cliffs on either side, Bagushidu had nowhere to run. Wang Chong's Origin Immortal Sword had slashed at the Earth Blood Cauldron on Bagushidu's body several dozen times. Cack-lack. Every time Wang Chong's 4-foot-long Origin Immortal Sword struck the Earth Blood Cauldron, a new crack would appear on it. He had struck the 3 Earth Blood Cauldrons several dozen times, each blow heavy and powerful. After dozens of blows, Bagushidu's Earth Blood Cauldrons were covered in cracks. In some places, the cracks were as wide as a finger and seemed ready to shatter at any moment. King of foreign lands, you madman! Bagushidu's long hair blew in the wind, and he was both shocked and furious. Wang Chong's attacks were frenzied, and a dark red torrent of stellar energy was constantly revolving around him. And on his shoulders, the signature red and gold symbols of the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art, the sun and moon, appeared at the same time in a dazzling display. Wang Chong had fully recovered his energy, and the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art was displaying its savage side. Not only was spiritual energy gathering in this underground space, even Bagushidu's black stellar energy was restless, wanting to break out of his body and pour into Wang Chang's body. Without the powerful protection of the Earth-Blood Cauldron, Bagushidu alone could not stop Wang Chang's tyrannical great Yin-Yang heaven creation art. Bagushidu, accept your fate. Wang Chang's voice was cold and emotionless as it resounded through the world. Bang! As the two of them were speaking, the demonic Emperor Old Man and the Wushang village chief silently shot out from behind them. Boom boom boom. Once, twice, thrice, in the face of the combined attacks of three supreme experts, Bagushidu's stellar energy was rapidly consumed and growing weaker. Bagushidu couldn't even speak. But this was not the end. While Bagushidu was frantically trying to deal with these attacks, he suddenly heard a loud roar, "Gong Gong divine art." Before Bagushidu could react, a massive whirlpool of water appeared above him. Dark clouds roiled as destructive energy fused with these waves. In the center of these waves, one could faintly make out the shape of a trident. At this crucial moment, Jili Laozu had finally struck. There were only 2 chains cast from 1,000-year-old frigid iron above the abyss, and the space was extremely small. Coupled with the fact that he couldn't find a good angle to strike, Jili Laozu had not done much until now. Instead, he had used the water element's ability to conceal his energy to find the best moment to strike. Boom! The 3 supreme experts of the world attacked at the same time, unleashing 3 destructive waves of stellar energy that slammed into Bagushidu's stellar energy barrier. Not even someone of Bagushidu's abilities could hold on against this terrifying attack. Thump thump thump. Bagushidu's body trembled as he retreated several steps. The energy in his chest was in disarray and blood was surging up, but Bagushidu forcefully swallowed it back down. Chapter 1553. Bagushidu, take my attack. Art of God and Demon, obliteration. A furious roar came from behind Bagushidu, and Wang Chang's eyes shone like stars. While the evil emperor, chief of Wushang, and Jili Laozu were attacking Bagushidu, Wang Chang lunged forward and used his strongest technique. But this was not the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art that Wang Chang excelled in, but a powerful technique that Wang Chang had never used before. Rumble! In the blink of an eye, there was an earth-shattering boom. It was as if a bolt of lightning had flashed in the void. At the same time, Wang Chang's vast great Yin-Yang heaven creation art surged into the Origin Immortal Sword. Under the effect of the Origin Immortal Sword, the stellar energy cultivated from this illustrious martial arts of the martial arts world was rapidly compressed and transformed into new, denser and more tyrannical particles of energy. Buzz. At this moment, Wang Chang's aura suddenly changed. If Wang Chang's aura at the start was as majestic as a mountain, then the current Wang Chang's aura was sharp and unsheathed, terrifying to the extreme. He gave off the feeling that he was a sharp sword that could cut through all things in the world and destroy all obstacles. No. This was no longer just a look. Wang Chang had truly transformed into a sharp sword. Bang! In the blink of an eye, Wang Chang had become one with his sword, a milky white sword more than 30 meters long and millions of times more dazzling than the sun. It slashed down at Bagushidu with astonishing speed. At this moment, Wang Chang was completely different from any other time. His body exuded a pure and vigorous destructive sword intent that could pulverize all things in the world. What sword art is this? Let alone Bagushidu, even Wang Chang's master, the evil emperor, and the chief of Wushang grimaced. The new sword intent Wang Chang displayed was terrifying to the extreme, and it targeted the soul. The essence of the sword Tao was to annihilate all things in the world. This was the calamity of all living beings. Anyone who saw this sword would instinctively feel a fear from the depths of their soul. Art of God and Demon, obliteration. With the Origin Immortal Sword, Wang Chang was finally able to use this supreme sword art that was ranked second only to the Origin Immortal Art. Not good. Sensing the terrifying sword chi behind him, Bagushidu paled and hurriedly turned around. At the same time, he gathered the power of his 3 earth blood cauldrons to block the attack. Bagushidu had reacted very quickly, but he had still underestimated this sword. Boom! A milky white radiance illuminated the world, and Wang Chang's sword chi was so fast that it cleaved space in two, leaving a wound in the air that was several dozen meters long. Bagushidu didn't even have time to bring out the full power of the 3 earth blood cauldrons before Wang Chang's sword cut a path through the 3 cauldrons. This terrifying sword chi was so fast that not even the mind could keep up. Swoosh! The sound of a sharp blade piercing through flesh resounded in Bagushidu's ears, and his entire body trembled as he sensed that a dreadful sword had pierced through his body. The destructive sword chi pierced through his body and split into thousands of strands, crazily blasting into his meridians. Every cell in Bagushidu's body felt like it had been plunged into winter, and all his vitality was severed, turning him gray. How could this be? Bagushidu's body trembled, and his eyes went wide. At this moment, he could clearly sense that the world before him had turned gray, like a somber autumn that had lost all color. In just one attack, Bagushidu had suffered an unprecedented wound. Ah! With a scream, Bagushidu was pierced through by the terrifying power of the art of god and demon obliteration, and his body was sent flying like a ragdoll. Rumble! From a distance, one could see a milky white beam of sword chi cleaving through the air, and Bagushidu was flying high into the air along the sword chi. Through the thick fog, he smashed into the wall near the other end of the passage. The force of this blow was so strong that it directly cracked the entire cave wall. The earth shook as if it were on the verge of collapse. Bagushidu's body creaked, blood gushing out of his pores, and countless bones in his body had been broken. Let's go! Bagushidu's face was filled with fear, and he had lost all courage to fight. He had never encountered such a terrifying sword chi before. The remnant sword chi remained in every cell in his body. After the battle ended, it continued to destroy the vitality in his body. With every moment that passed, Bagushidu's injuries worsened. But what left Bagushidu most fearful was the unstoppable sharpness of that sword. Bagushidu's powerful black stellar energy was completely incapable of stopping this sword. Bang! Bagushidu slammed his right hand against the wall behind him and immediately charged toward the nearby passage. Bagushidu, do you think you can still run? At this moment, a cold voice came from behind, shaking the entire space. The evil emperor, the chief of Wushang, and Jili Laozu, these 3 titans of the martial arts world, attacked at the same time. 3 powerful waves of stellar energy shot through the air like comets, striking the fleeing Bagushidu. Ah! Bagushidu screamed, his vitality rapidly weakening. He was like a candle in the wind, about to be extinguished at any moment. No! Bagushidu's back was against the wall, his clothes in tatters and stained with blood. That pair of calm and calculating eyes suddenly widened. There was no calmness, no calculation, only the deepest fear. A single miscalculation had resulted in a complete defeat. The Origin Immortal Sword was so powerful that it could suppress ritual tools. This was something he had never imagined possible. And without the protection of the 3 earth blood cauldrons, not even Bagushidu could deal with the combined attacks of 4 top-class experts of the current era. Wang Chong and the demonic emperor working together could already suppress the Arab war god Qutayba, who had just reached the subtle realm. Now that the chief of Wushang and Jili Laozu had joined in, Bagushidu had no chance of surviving. Bang! Accompanied by an earth-shattering explosion, a majestic milky white sword chi illuminated the world behind the 3 of them, turning the dark underground world into a dazzling day. Bagushidu didn't even have time to cover his eyes before he was engulfed by the milky white sword chi, and then everything went dark. Plush! As the sword chi faded, a disheveled head tumbled to the ground, leaving behind Bagushidu's headless body, which slowly collapsed against the wall and became motionless. Behind him, there was a hole that was about 3 meters deep. It was pitch black and looked shocking to the eye. He's finally been killed. The moment Bagushidu fell, several figures flew through the fog toward the stone bridge. Of all these people, Jili Laozu was the first to arrive. As he stared at Bagushidu's corpse, Jili Laozu breathed a long sigh of relief. Bagushidu, the Earth sect master of the Eastern Turks, had been far too dangerous. In front of 4 people, and even the third-generation successor, he had managed to launch a sneak attack and capture Wang Chong. None of them had been a match for him. But in the end, this peerless expert of the Northeast, whose name had shaken the Tang dynasty and the Eastern Turks, had died at the hands of 4 people. The reversal was so massive that for a moment, Jili Laozu's mind was in a daze, not daring to believe that this terrifying existence of the dark radiant heaven had really died. "How are you?" At this moment, Chief of Wushang, leaning on his cane, was the second to arrive. "I'm fine." Jili Laozu shook his head. "But this fellow can't be any more dead. Without Bagushidu, the Earth sect of the Eastern Turks will fall into chaos for some time. Last time, Ishinishidu used his supreme divine ability to send the Earth blood cauldron back to the surface. But this time, the Earth sect won't be so lucky." As Jili Laozu spoke, he glanced at the 3 cauldrons at Bagushidu's side. These 3 powerful ritual tools renowned throughout the Northeast had been covered in cracks by Wang Chong's attack. In some places there were even cracks that were more than half an inch wide, like corroded steel. It was a ghastly sight. Just this alone was enough to cripple half of the cauldron's power. Without several hundred years of repair, they would never be able to recover. Truly, everything has its vanquisher. Bagushidu was renowned in the northeastern region of Yuzhou for his schemes, intelligence, and formidable martial arts. But who could have imagined that this grandmaster of the Earth sect would die at the hands of a teenaged boy? Bagushidu, you've truly provoked the wrong person. Jili Laozu mentally sighed. In this battle, Bagushidu seemed to have been defeated by the combined efforts of the 4 of them, but Jili Laozu was well aware that this was all because of the strength of the Tang dynasty's king of foreign lands. If not for him, they would have had no chance of victory. In truth, before Wang Chong had charged up the chain and onto the altar, the situation had been extremely unfavorable for them, with Bagushidu firmly in his grasp. The death of the third-generation successor had made it impossible for Jili Laozu to leave alone. Chapter 1554. Even Jili Laozu found it hard to believe that Wang Chong only had a third of his strength, that he had to deal with the first-generation guardian, the divine sword, and that Bagushidu had buried the Earth sect's forbidden art, the dark moon's flame, in his body. This youth seemed to possess limitless potential, and there seemed to be nothing he couldn't do. This was probably the existence in the world that could not be provoked. It's over. While Jili Laozu was sighing, the evil emperor had also stepped over the chains, crossed the stone bridge, and reached the surface. He didn't even glance at Bagushidu. A Turkic expert coveting the Origin immortal treasury wasn't much to him. "This is a dangerous place, and we can't stay here for long. Chonger, did you obtain the Origin immortal art?" The evil emperor turned to Wang Chong. "No, but I did find Senior Zhou's formation divine tome." Executing the wild goose descending the sand form, Wang Chong slowly descended to the ground from behind. "What?" The demonic Emperor Old Man and Wushang village chief both trembled at these words, their faces paling. Even Jili Laozu turned his head in shock. The Origin Immortal Lord had set up such a chasm, with a first-generation guardian and a divine sword guarding it, and this was the very core of the Origin Immortal Treasury. How could there not be an Origin Immortal art? Moreover, they had clearly seen Wang Chong ascend the altar, pull out his sword, and take out a few things. I don't know what's going on either, but I feel like the Origin Immortal Lord's treasury isn't that simple. There's probably another world here, and there might be some other mechanism or other changes. In short, it can't be that simple," Wang Chong sternly said. In an instant, the three of them frowned deeply. Putting Jili Laozu aside, the evil emperor and the chief of Wushang knew that Wang Chong would never lie to them. If he said no, then it must be true. If there's nothing on the altar, then this is going to be troublesome. The evil emperor remained silent. For the first time, he felt troubled. It was said that the Origin Immortal Lord had the ability to foresee the future. If Wang Chong had not found it, it meant that this legendary expert had other plans. But the troublesome thing was that there wasn't much time left for them. And without the Origin Immortal Art, the incomplete Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art would always be a flaw. Boom! Just as the two of them were talking, the ground suddenly shook. Then, a series of footsteps, accompanied by the noise of people, came from the tunnel. Hearing this voice, the four of them shuddered and a look of shock appeared on their faces. This was the core of the treasury, and it was guarded by generations of walking corpses. It was simply too difficult. Even Wang Chong and Bagushidu had only been able to avoid the second-generation successor and enter this place. But based on the sound of the footsteps, it was clear that many people had entered the tunnel. What's going on? Why are there so many people? Jili Laozu's eyes went wide in disbelief. The demonic emperor old man, Wushang village chief, and the others had the same thoughts. However, before everyone could react, the auras rapidly approached, and at the same time, a wave of panicked shouts came from the passageway like a landslide and a tsunami. Run! They're coming! Out of the way, out of the way! Ah, we're going to die! Get out of my way! What are you afraid of? We have so many people. Can't we deal with them? If you want to die, go. Don't stop us. Not good, they're catching up. Boom! A martial artist with disheveled hair and a ghastly complexion charged out of the tunnel. Behind him, a flood of martial artists surged forward, charging into the area where Wang Chong's group was located. Behind them, a large number of experts were still rushing over. This sudden sight left Wang Chong and the others dumbfounded. What's going on here? Wang Chong was flabbergasted by the panic and fear of the martial artists. These martial artists clearly didn't have the strength to easily reach this place. Just the second-generation successor was enough to keep all of them at bay. But what left Wang Chong even more shocked was what happened behind him. Roar! There was a heaven-shaking roar, and then the entire tunnel began to fiercely tremble. Dust and dirt began to fall from the walls and the ceiling above Wang Chong's group. The Black Yin Ancestor. Wang Chong's pupils constricted as he instantly recognized that extremely dark and turbid evil path energy. Not only that, Wang Chong also sensed the auras of the Bone Devil Ancestor and the Myriad Ghost Ancestor behind the Black Yin Ancestor. These three titans of the evil path of the Five Ancestor Alliance had also arrived. Out of the way! This one will kill anyone who dares to stop me. The Black Yin Ancestor's ruthless voice resounded through the air. Boom boom boom. A moment later, screams filled the tunnel as Wang Chong's group watched one martial artist after another fly out like ragdolls. In the blink of an eye, black smoke billowed, and a huge black dragon head that looked incomparably ferocious squeezed out of the passage that was taller than a person. Thump! The Black Yin Ancestor's black dragon form flew out of the passage, and the Bone Devil Ancestor and Myriad Ghost Ancestor followed closely behind him. The three Evil Path Ancestors no longer had their usual arrogance and haughtiness. On the contrary, they seemed rather apprehensive and fearful, as if something dreadful was chasing them. Not good. There's a cliff up ahead. With panicked cries, the martial artists who had charged in quickly realized that there was a bottomless abyss in front of them. In a flash, the core region was thrown into chaos. In the rear, the martial artists seemed to be being driven away, all of them fighting to be the first to charge out of the passage. As for the main characters of this incident, Wang Chong, the evil emperor, and Jili Laozu, they had been forgotten. For a moment, no one paid them any attention. Buzz. More and more people gathered in the core region. At this moment, Another powerful aura appeared in everyone's perception like a storm. "It's Song Yuanyi." A familiar voice rang out. It was Jili Laozu. As experts of the martial arts world, they had fought before, so Jili Laozu was extremely familiar with Song Yuanyi's energy. In truth, Song Yuanyi's eternal spring mantra's energy was so unique that no one in the world could imitate it. "What's going on?" Wang Chong, the evil emperor, Jili Laozu, and the chief of Wushang glanced at each other, all of them sensing a deep unease in each other's eyes. Putting aside the others, even the Black Yin ancestor, the Bone Devil ancestor, the Myriad Ghost ancestor, and Song Yuanyi, these titans of the martial arts world, had been forced to flee in panic, driven to the core region. This was not something an ordinary person could do. Assume formation. A few moments later, a series of harsh shouts came from the passage. The experts of the Zhengqi League charged out of the passage, surging toward the right side. Unlike the rest of the chaotic crowd, these people immediately formed a formation the moment they appeared. They lined up neatly and were ready for battle. Bang bang! In a flash of white light, two figures with majestic energy charged out of the passage like a storm. They made a sharp turn in the air and immediately landed in front of the Zhengqi League group. "Everyone, hear my order! Activate the 7 lore formation." Song Yuanyi and Xie Guangding stood side by side, their expressions unprecedentedly solemn. Their gazes swept across the crowd and exchanged glances with Wang Chong and the evil emperor. Without pausing, they quickly turned to the cave entrance. Wang Chong's heart instantly sank. He knew of Song Yuanyi's personality. This person was extremely stubborn. From the northwest border all the way to the underground region, this person's heart had been steeled. No matter what the situation was, he had always wanted to exterminate Wang Chong and the evil emperor. But just now, when Wang Chong had met his gaze, Song Yuanyi had not paused and immediately turned to look at the cave entrance. This could only mean one thing. In Song Yuanyi's mind, the impending danger was far more important than killing Wang Chong and the demonic emperor. Bang! As if in response to Wang Chong's thoughts, the air in the passage exploded and a dreadful energy swept out of the passage. "Aya!" Screams filled the air as the tensome martial artists at the very back were caught up to by this destructive energy. Screaming, they were sent flying out of the passage. Thud thud thud. Tensome sect martial artists crashed into the crowd, exploding into a bloody mess and sending severed limbs flying through the air. The moment he landed on the ground, he had already lost all signs of life and turned into a corpse. "Ah!" Cries of alarm rang out in the crowd. Countless martial artists paled and hurriedly retreated in fright. There was an extremely terrifying and unsettling atmosphere in the air. "Hihei, none of you will be leaving here alive today." At this moment, a cold, emotionless sneer came from the passageway. Boom! Before the crowd could react, another corpse flew out from the passageway and smashed into the restless crowd outside the cave. Boom, boom, boom. In the blink of an eye, dust billowed out, and miserable shrieks rang out as countless people were smashed into by the corpses and sent flying backward. The corpse that had been thrown out of the passage slid for Tensum Zhang, almost off the cliff, before finally coming to a stop. Wang Chong had been standing on the left side of the passage. When that corpse had been thrown out, Wang Chong had sensed a scorching energy within it, and then he had sensed nothing. This person was far more powerful and frightening than he had imagined. Chapter 1555. Second Generation. Wang Chong's eyes widened as he finally lost his composure. The corpse that had been thrown out of the cave was head down and feet up, making it impossible to see its face, but Wang Chong was able to recognize it at a glance from the ancient robes of the Western Han dynasty. Clang! Soon after, a cold light flashed, and a long sword was thrown out from inside, smashing to the ground. Wang Chong only glanced at it before his heart sank. This was the second generation's sword. Wang Chong had been very close to the second generation's sword as he had passed through the underground palace, so he was extremely familiar with the patterns on it, the shape of the hilt, and everything else. If he could only guess because he couldn't see the face, then the second generation's sword that had been thrown out of the tunnel was a clear indication of everything. How could this be? Wang Chong's mind reeled in shock. At this moment, he suddenly understood why the crowd was so terrified, and why these ordinary martial artists had been able to smoothly make their way here. It's them. A thought flitted through Wang Chong's mind, and he instantly understood what was going on. The second generation had already reached the subtle realm, and with the power of the origin immortal art, not even many subtle realm experts would be a match for him. And in the entire operation, in the entire cavern, the only ones who had the qualifications and ability to destroy the second king Yenluo were probably those few people. Walala! A few moments later, as if responding to Wang Chong's thoughts, there was a flash of light, and a large group of people surged out of the narrow passage. Unlike the martial artists who had come out earlier, these people had vicious eyes but much calmer expressions. Careful! They're coming out! The appearance of these men in black immediately caused the crowd to grow restless. An uneasy atmosphere pervaded the air. The martial artists' eyes were wide open, their throats swallowing, their foreheads dripping with cold sweat, their faces revealing clear fear and alarm. Wang Chong said nothing, but his expression turned grim. Everything was clear. After delaying for so long, these mysterious and powerful black-clothed men had finally arrived at the core area. This was not the first time Wang Chong had dealt with these people, and he knew that they were vicious and merciless. Most importantly, these people were terrifyingly strong. I'm afraid today's matter won't end well. Wang Chong's heart sank as he said to himself. And at this moment, buzz! There were new changes in the passageway. 3 powerful auras suddenly appeared in everyone's perception. They were like blazing suns. In the core region, those who could survive the layers of traps were all expert. However, compared to these 3 auras, he was as insignificant as an ant. Rumble! The ground quaked, and in the blink of an eye 3 figures appeared. Their movements were calm, and their eyes were filled with disdain. Their faces were covered with golden masks, and they looked like gods who had descended to the mortal world. They slowly walked out of the passageway and appeared before everyone's eyes. As soon as the 3 of them appeared, the air seemed to solidify, and 3 invisible waves of pressure, as heavy as mountains, swept out in all directions. Even Song Yuanyi, Xie Guangding, the Black Yin ancestor, the Bone Devil ancestor, and the Myriad Ghost ancestor tensed up as if they were facing a powerful foe. For the first time, they appeared rather nervous. 3 people. The sight of this godlike golden-masked man in black shrouded in golden light caused Wang Chong, the evil emperor, the chief of Wushang, and Jili Laozu to grimace in shock. One of these 3 people was someone the 4 of them had met before. It was none other than the man with the 3-eyed deer mask, who had appeared on the surface of the Origin Immortal Formation and used his pair of giant golden hands to tear apart the Origin Immortal Formation's barrier. This man had a cold expression and sharp eyes, and his body was brimming with destructive energy. He was clearly a supreme expert of the subtle realm. Once one reached the subtle realm, one would be on a completely different level from the vast majority of martial artists in the mortal world, including peak great generals. Wang Chong and the others had already experienced this for themselves. The man with the 3-eyed deer mask possessed unfathomable strength, and he was not even the slightest bit weaker than the second-generation successor. As for the other 2, one of them wore a golden goat mask with 4 black horns on it, while the other wore a golden red tiger mask. They looked as mighty as hell, mysterious and unfathomable. The 4-horned goat-masked man was a little weaker than the man with the 3-eyed deer mask, but the man with the golden red tiger mask exuded a vast sea of energy that was even more frightening than the other 2. In fact, from his position in the middle, it could be seen that the strength, identity, and status of this newly arrived man with the golden-red tiger mask was actually above that of the man with the three-eyed deer mask who had arrived earlier. One man with the three-eyed deer mask was already extremely difficult to deal with, and Wang Chong had never imagined that another expert in black would appear, perhaps even stronger. Wang Chong's heart sank and his face twisted into a nasty grimace. Don't let a single one escape. At this moment, the man with the golden-red tiger mask in the middle suddenly spoke. An enormous aura like an avalanche engulfed the entire battlefield. Before this aura, even Song Yuanyi, the Black Yin ancestor, and the others paled in comparison. As he spoke, countless men in black surged in behind him, with the three bamboo hat men standing out the most. Besides these three, there were 4 or 5 other experts who were no weaker than the three bamboo hat men. It's over. We're doomed. Just who are they? Why are they doing this? It can't be. I won't die here. I'll fight them to the death. As the fog churned, an atmosphere of despair and panic began to spread through the crowd. Looking down from a high vantage point, one could see that the countless martial artists in the vicinity of the small passage were retreating. Bastard! No matter what, you won't succeed. A woman's shrill curses resounded through the underground core, her voice particularly harsh in the chaos of the crowd. Following the voice, Wang Chong saw that the man with the golden-red tiger mask had raised an arm, his fingers gripping the neck of a middle-aged woman like a pair of pincers. This woman's hair was in disarray, her expression mournful, and her eyes were suffused with deep hatred. It's her. Wang Chong didn't recognize her at first glance, but when he saw the familiar white robe the woman wore, Wang Chong immediately understood. The woman being gripped by the man with the golden-red tiger mask was none other than the Origin Immortal Village chief who had appeared in Green Fire Cave. The metal mask she had been wearing had long ago fallen off her face, and her aura was in disarray, making her seem extremely weak. Blood trickled from the corner of her lips, and it was apparent that she had been tortured. As expected, she still ended up in their hands. Wang Chong raised an eyebrow. In the underground river, he had heard at least 3 tremors caused by large mechanisms. Even though she had ended up in the hands of the 3 men in black, it was apparent that this Origin Immortal Village chief had made them suffer. Foolish woman, we have plenty of ways to make you talk. Even if you used all the mechanisms you could, in the end we still ended up here. Don't think that just because you won't talk, we won't be able to get what we want out of you. Right at this moment, the tall and skinny man with the 4-horned goat mask on the far left suddenly spoke, his voice extremely cold. Someone, bring out those captives from the Origin Immortal Village. The man with the 4-horned goat mask waved a hand behind him, and the men in black quickly escorted 7 or 8 members of the Origin Immortal Village. Other than some ordinary Origin Immortal villagers, there were also quite a few elders of the Origin Immortal Village. Swish! Without the slightest hesitation, one of the men in black swung down his saber and beheaded an Origin Immortal Village chief. The headless body fell to the ground, blood gushing out of it. Bastard! You bastards! I won't let you get away with this. The Origin Immortal Village chief seemed to be greatly provoked by this sight. Her eyes went red, and her body twisted and struggled as she let out heart-wrenching curses. Kill a few more. Kill that elder as well. The man with the 3-eyed deer mask on the right gave the order, his voice even colder and crueler than that of the man with the 4-horned goat mask. The 4 men in black immediately stepped forward, each of them standing next to an Origin Immortal Village chief. Bastard! You bastards! Even if I become a ghost, I won't let you get away with this. The Origin Immortal villagers madly cursed, their eyes bursting with hatred. They struggled with all their might, but with their energy sealed, they could not escape. Crack! With this order, 3 of the Origin Immortal villagers fell to the ground without a sound, blood gushing out of their bodies and spreading through their bodies. Now it's your turn. At this moment, one of the black-clothed experts, no weaker than the 3 bamboo hat men, walked up to the white-bearded Origin Immortal Elder and pressed his sword against the Elder's neck. The sharp edge of the sword immediately left a deep gash on the Elder's neck, from which blood gushed out. "There's no need for such trouble. Since she won't speak, kill the rest of the Origin Immortal villagers. These Origin Immortal village descendants no longer have the right to exist in this world." Right at this moment, a dignified and sonorous voice resounded. The voice was sonorous and revealed a domineering and tyrannical aura that shook the hearts of all. At this moment, the leader of the group, the man with the golden-red tiger mask, spoke. Chapter 1556. Yes. The black-clothed men bowed and immediately walked behind the remaining Origin Immortal villagers, preparing to execute them. In addition, a group of ants followed us all the way here. "Go to Mortal, cut the weeds and pull out the roots. I leave this matter to you," the tiger-masked man said, his words the straw that broke the camel's back. "Beast! You damned beasts! I'll tell you. Let them go and I'll tell you everything." The Origin Immortal village chief was hysterical and on the verge of collapse. All these men in black were callous and decisive assassins. Once they gave the order, there would be no room for negotiation. Once the tiger-masked man gave the order, the Origin Immortal villagers that had existed for more than 1,000 years would be completely wiped out. "You bastards, all of you will die a horrible death." A shrill howl resounded through the air. Buzz! But a moment later, the tiger-masked man pulled back his wrist and raised the hysterical Origin Immortal village chief less than half an inch from his face. "Foolish woman, are you cursing a god? Death has no meaning to us. Just tell me the answer I want," the tiger-masked man coldly said. An enormous stream of psychic energy erupted from his body and connected him to the Origin Immortal village chief. "Humph, if I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have acted in the first place." A few moments later, the tiger-masked man tossed the Origin Immortal village chief to the ground. Buzz! A moment later, the tiger-masked man extended a finger and lightly flicked it. A golden-red strand of stellar energy condensed into metallic particles that began to twist and transform in the air. In the blink of an eye, it had transformed into an Origin Immortal diagram more than 2 meters in diameter that slowly revolved in the air, as if it had a life of its own. Boom! The tiger-masked man extended his right hand and thrust his palm at the Origin Immortal diagram. A moment later, the air trembled and the earth rumbled. Dust and gravel rained down from the sky while the thick fog beneath the ground began to seethe. With a loud bang, the void trembled. The man with the golden-red tiger mask seemed to have opened some kind of restriction in the void. In the next moment, the earth trembled, and countless rocks fell from the surrounding cavern walls. Not far from the 3 men in black, the ground split open, and a mysterious bronze pillar extended out from the ground. The surface of this pillar was covered in patterns, and there were many ancient runes on the surface, as well as some pictures of ancient beasts. It looked dignified, solemn, and mysterious. Everyone watched as the man with the golden-red tiger mask slowly walked forward. In an instant, everyone noticed that there was an overarching disc protruding from the top of the bronze pillar. The man with the golden-red tiger mask walked up and pressed the disc on the top. He rotated it twice and then slammed it down with a bang. However, nothing happened around them. This sudden turn of events left everyone dumbfounded. "Master!" Wang Chong subconsciously turned to the evil emperor, but the latter shook his head and stopped Wang Chong. "Whether it's the Origin Immortal villagers or these men in black, they're our enemies, not our friends. The men in black might want to kill us, but the Origin Immortal villagers won't let us go either. And based on what they've done, this Origin Immortal treasury probably has its own paradise. Don't act recklessly. Let's wait and see." Whether it was Wang Chong, the evil emperor, or the chief of Wushang, they were all top-class experts of the current era. But this was only for the experts on the surface. And these men in black belonged to no faction. Not even people like Wang Chong, who had interacted with them on many occasions, knew anything about their background, much less anyone else. Wang Chong said nothing, only slightly creased his brow as he subconsciously scanned his surroundings. Everyone around him, including Song Yuanyi and the Black Yin ancestor, had wary and cautious expressions on their faces. They had no intention of acting recklessly. It was clear to see that they were extremely afraid of these men in black. On the other side, the man with the golden-red tiger mask was frowning. He seemed to be lost in thought because of what was happening in front of him. But very quickly, his brows relaxed, as if he immediately understood. "Humph!" The tiger-masked man coldly snorted, and without even turning his head, he thrust out a palm. Nearby, the Origin Immortal village chief that he had left behind was pulled by an invisible thread into the tiger-masked man's hand. Swish! There was a burst of bloody light as the tiger-masked man used a finger to cut the Origin Immortal village chief's arm, causing a spray of blood to splash onto the bronze pillar. The dark red blood immediately seeped into the interior of the bronze pillar as if it had met a sponge. A few moments later, it was completely sucked dry. Rumble! Accompanied by an earth-shattering noise, the bronze pillar that was as tall as a human suddenly retracted into the ground. Immediately after, the earth rumbled, and a loud cracking sound came from the depths of the earth. There was also the sound of gears turning. What's going on here? Is there some kind of mechanism underground? Cries of alarm rang out as the crowd began to back away, fearful that they might fall into some sort of trap. Just what are these scoundrels looking for? If it was just the Origin Immortal art, would they need to go through so much trouble? All the martial artists looked fearful, shocked, and doubtful. These black-clothed men always gave them a strange feeling, as if they were incompatible with the rest of the group. Meanwhile, Wang Chong remained silent, hidden in the crowd. Unlike the others, he had powerful psychic energy, and the moment the bronze pillar retracted into the ground, he had clearly sensed a powerful ripple traveling through the ground to the top of the abyss. As the ripple traveled upward, it grew fainter and fainter until it was almost inaudible. Silence, incomparable silence. Everyone was on standby, silently observing the progress and changes of the matter. At this moment, even the black-clothed men silently raised their heads and looked at the endless sky covered by the thick fog, waiting silently. Time ticked by, and just when the atmosphere was at its most frozen, "This is—" Looking up, Wang Chong was the first to sense something. In just a short moment, rumble could be heard from above the bottomless abyss. It was as if some colossal creature had been shaken. The sound wasn't obvious at first, but as time went on, it became deafening and became more and more intense. "Look over there!" At this moment, someone looked up and suddenly cried out, "Rumble!" In the next moment, the air whistled sharply, and a dazzling golden light expanded before everyone's eyes. Like a comet crashing into the earth, it suddenly plummeted downwards at an extremely fast speed. At first glance, this golden light was only the size of a sesame seed, at least 8,000 or 9,000 meters away. But in the blink of an eye, this sesame seed had swelled to hundreds of thousands of times its original size, transforming into a massive golden sphere. And within this golden sphere there seemed to be something else. Not good. Careful! The comet-like light was incomparably blazing. The golden light that erupted from his body was like a scorching sun, illuminating the dark underground as if it was daytime. Rumble! In less than a few breaths of time, the huge golden ball of light smashed fiercely at the end of the chain, at the ancient altar that was floating in midair. The golden ball of light plummeted from the sky, its power terrifying and powerful. The moment it hit the ground, the air boomed and exploded, sending waves of energy sweeping out in all directions. Thump thump! A martial artist on the edge of the cliff was unable to react in time and was struck by the waves of energy. Screams rang out as they were sent tumbling through the air. The martial artists that had calmed down immediately fell into chaos. Just what is that thing? Boom! Wang Chong spread out the stellar energy in his body, his eyes completely drawn to the golden ball of light falling from the sky. As the dust churned and the shock wave of energy swept through the area, Wang Chong looked in the direction of the explosion. How could this be? Even though Wang Chong had already mentally prepared himself, the sight of the ball of light on the distant altar still caused his body to tremble and a hint of shock to appear on his face. As he walked along the stone bridge and passed through two thick chains, Wang Chong saw a flickering golden light in the center of the thick fog. And within the flickering light, there was actually an ancient palace hall. This palace was decorated with flying eaves and dazzling golden walls. It exuded a grandeur that transcended time and space. For a moment, Wang Chong felt like he had passed through the surging flood of history and returned to the spring and autumn and warring states period. That solemn, imposing, ancient, and solemn aura aroused reverence in one's heart and caused one to gasp in admiration. With just a glance, Wang Chong's attention was drawn to the golden characters written on the signboard of the palace. The Origin Immortal Palace. The words on the signboard exuded a majestic and oppressive aura, as if a god was looking down on the world. It really is the Origin Immortal Palace. Wang Chong's body trembled as an indescribable feeling welled up in his heart. Although he hadn't obtained the Origin Immortal art from the core of the treasury, Wang Chong had vaguely sensed that this adventure was not as simple as it seemed. There seemed to be something else hidden behind the trial of the first-generation successor and the Origin Immortal sword. But that was just a guess, and he couldn't see anything else from the core. If not for these men in black, Wang Chong would have never imagined that the core of the treasury was hiding something else. The true treasury was actually hidden high above his head. These men in black knew that there was a secret here. Chapter 1557. If my guess is correct, the real supreme and infinite Origin Immortal art should be hidden there. The Origin Immortal art. It's the Origin Immortal art. Hurry and charge over. Ha ha ha, the Origin Immortal art is mine now. Anyone who makes an enemy of me will die. Get out of my way. The world's #1 art is mine. Wang Chong was far from the only one who understood this point. As the Origin Immortal Palace descended from the sky and landed on the altar, some of the martial artists immediately used movement techniques to rush toward the Origin Immortal Palace shrouded in golden light, not even bothering with the men in black behind them. Whoosh! Whoosh! The stone bridge and the iron chains flew past as these martial artists charged over in a frenzy. But a moment later, when these people touched the golden light on the outermost edge of the Origin Immortal Palace, rumble! The golden light blazed as if some sort of seal had been triggered, and a dreadful and unstoppable energy surged forward. The fact that these martial artists had been able to last this long meant that each one of them was a powerful expert, but when struck by the golden light, they were sent flying like ragdolls. And behind them was Wan Zhang, Deep, Yuan. The shrill screams grew further and further away, and in just a few moments, all the cultivators had disappeared. Fools! At the sight of this, the leader of the group, the man with the golden-red tiger mask, laughed coldly. He looked at the disappearing cultivators as if they were idiots. They had planned this operation for a very, very long time. If not for the seal around the Origin Immortal Palace making it difficult to charge in, they would never have left such an opening for these martial artists to get ahead of them. Everyone, hear my order! Kill them! Kill them all! The tiger-masked man's eyes were cold and callous. With a wave of his sleeve, he gave the order to kill the martial artists. Kill! Without any hesitation, in the next moment, all the black-clad experts in front of the tunnel entrance surged with killing chi. They brandished their sabers and swords and charged at the vast crowd of cultivators. Although the opposing side seemed to have the most number of martial artists, these black-clothed experts roared angrily, giving people the feeling that they had the absolute advantage. Roar! Bestial howls rang out as the black-clothed men began to transform into half-luwu and half-luwu creatures or black flame asuras exuding powerful auras. With lightning-fast speed, they charged at the martial artists. A massacre had begun. Kill. Be careful, fight it out with them. On the other side, with a cliff behind them, the martial artists quickly engaged in a chaotic battle with this group, their eyes bloodshot. Saber and sword clashed, and stellar energy clashed. The scene became extremely chaotic. Pu. The half-luwu and black flame asuras were like tigers in a flock of sheep, charging and slaughtering the martial artists, throwing them into disarray. The storm-like attacks came from all directions, but they were completely blocked by these mutated black-clothed men with their tyrannical bodies and terrifying strength. They didn't even use any weapons. They only used their 10 fingers to pierce through the martial artists' astral energy. Their round fingers pierced through the martial artists' bodies, leaving bloody holes in them. The martial artists trembled and immediately dropped to the ground. Some of the experts from the other sects were powerful, but when they were entangled by the black flames, their stellar energy began to burn and they couldn't help but let out shrill and terrified howls. Humph, the harvest has only just begun. At almost the same time, a bamboo hat man suddenly stepped forward, the corner of his lips peeking out from the edge of his bamboo hat slightly curling into a cruel and callous smile. Clang! As the battle raged on, the bamboo hat man unsheathed the saber at his waist, accompanied by a saber energy that crackled like lightning. Bang! The air exploded, and the bamboo hat man's body swayed as he vanished into the void. Greater void step. The bamboo hat man moved like a bolt of lightning, his body flickering about the battlefield so fast that not even the naked eye could keep up with him. All one could see was faint white ripples spreading and transforming in the air. Behind him, the other 2 bamboo hat men, including the bamboo hat leader, also began to attack. In order to settle this once and for all, the dear immortal had summoned the other great immortals. 3 great immortals attacking at the same time was an extremely rare sight in the organization. Even the 3 bamboo hat men were very careful, not daring to show the slightest bit of carelessness. 1, 2, 3 At this moment, almost all the men in black had moved out, and screams filled the air. As the 2 sides clashed, one martial artist after another was forced to retreat, suffering grievous casualties. Assume formation. At this moment, Jingqi League Lord Song Yuan's eyes flashed as he gave the order. His voice was steady and heavy, extremely calm. In the midst of this chaos, he exuded a sense of calm and confidence. In a flash, the surrounding martial artists subconsciously began to approach the Righteous Alliance group. Buzz. With Song Yuan's order, the experts of the Jingqi League began to vibrate with stellar energy. In small groups of 3, they began to form small formations, and then 5 small formations joined together to form a larger formation. All of the formations were connected to one another. Their auras merged into one, as if they were a single person. Awo! In the blink of an eye, the black-clothed men advanced, their experts charging toward Song Yuan's group. A half-Lu Wuss in black screamed, his hair disheveled and his expression savage. Like a beast choosing its prey, he lunged at Song Yuan. "Alliance Lord, watch out!" Cries of alarm could be heard. These half-Lu Wuss in black had such powerful bodies that they could even block stellar energy. Who knew how many martial artists they had just killed? But in the face of all this, Song Yuan remained calm, not a hint of panic in his eyes. Bang! As the half-Lu Wuss in black charged forward, a deep green light flickered on his body. Boom! Song Yuan didn't move at all, but when the beast-like half-Lu Wuss in black was still 3 feet away from Song Yuan, it suddenly crashed into an invisible barrier. Dizzy, it came to a sudden stop. Boom! Song Yuan held his hands behind his back and remained motionless, only his robe fluttering. A moment later, a stream of green stellar energy flowed through the pores of the Lu Wushuang man in black and into his body. Cackalack! Countless leaves and vines sprouted out of the pores of the Lu Wus in black, and even some brightly colored flowers began to sprout from them. Their exposed skin also quickly changed from a copper-iron black to a tree-like green. How could this be? The Lu Wus slowly raised his head, his eyes brimming with disbelief as he stared at the indifferent Song Yuanyi. Cackalack! A few moments later, this powerful and invincible Lu Wus in black immediately turned into a tree that stood motionless in front of Song Yuanyi. Their life energy had completely vanished. The Lu Wus, by sacrificing a great deal of stellar energy and latent potential, they were able to greatly increase the strength of their bodies and move faster and faster, like a monster. Alas, this simple strengthening of the body was actually much easier for Song Yuanyi, who was skilled in the spring art. Bastard! The bamboo hat man's expression chilled at this sight, and he transformed into a black whirlwind that lunged at the Righteous Alliance members behind Song Yuanyi and Song Yuanhei with incredible speed. Great sundering art! A calm and unhurried voice came from the side. Before Song Yuanyi could act, the Vice Alliance Lord of the Zhengqi League, Xie Guangding, stepped forward and punched. This punch seemed slow but was fast, and before the man in black could get close, Xie Guangding had already taken the initiative to attack. Broom! The earth quaked and stellar energy boomed. Endless white light more dazzling than the sun exploded from Xie Guangding's fist. In that instant the space trembled, and in front of Xie Guangding's grand sundering art, countless cracks immediately appeared like glass. At the same time, the bamboo hat man's dreadful stellar energy was also torn apart. Great sundering art of the 8 directions. In terms of countering blows, fighting against single opponents, and shattering stellar energy, there was no art in the world that was more formidable than the great sundering art. Even Song Yuanyi, a peerless expert who had cultivated the eternal spring mantra to perfection and whose stellar energy was as hard as steel, was in danger of being broken by Xie Guangding, let alone anyone else. All Zhengqi League disciples, hear my order! Attack with all your might! A voice rang out in everyone's ears. Song Yuanyi's expression chilled as he gave the order to attack. Kill! Several dozen Zhengqi League experts, including Elder Sikong Yuanjia, howled as they charged at the man in black. Chapter 1558. The eternal spring qi quickly raised their spirits to the peak, and at the same time, healed their internal injuries one by one. Boom boom boom. In just a few seconds, the Zhengqi League experts in the formation began to engage in fierce battle with the men in black. Above their heads there was a flash of light, and with a heaven-shaking explosion, stellar energy exploded in the midst of the men in black. Miserable screams rang out as the 8 black-clothed experts were killed by Song Yuanyi's eternal spring mantra before they could even make a sound. Seeking death. At almost the same time, Xie Guangding's eyes flashed with cold light as he attacked. Putting aside Song Yuanyi and Xie Guangding, on the left side of the passage, the members of the 5-group alliance were also enduring the frenzied attacks of the men in black. However, unlike the Zhengqi League, the 5-group alliance did not have such complicated formations or tactic. They only had one method of fighting: to fight with all their strength and to fight to the death. Awo! With a heaven-shaking bestial roar, a massive black dragon lunged forward, its long tail fiercely lashing out. With a single strike, 10 men in black were sent flying like ragdolls. Boom! Those dragon claws heavily stomped down, and a black-robed man's face was filled with terror. He didn't even have time to dodge, and his protective stellar energy was scattered by the pitch-black dragon claws, and he was smashed into a pile of meat paste. Humph, if you want to kill this old man, I'd like to see just what skill you have. The Black Een ancestor's cold and sinister voice resounded over the battlefield. Behind them was a cliff, and the members of the 5-group alliance had already been forced into desperate straits. Cornered beasts would still struggle, and the Black Een ancestor had a titan of the evil path with him. At almost the same moment that the Black Een ancestor launched his attack, the earth quaked as another enormous storm of energy appeared in everyone's perception. Roar! Right behind the black dragon, a huge bone demon appeared. It was 30 to 40 meters tall, and black smoke surged from its body. It looked incomparably malevolent, and it appeared before everyone's eyes. Wrath of the Bone Devil. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, countless dried bones were uprooted from the ground and gathered in the giant bone demon's right arm, turning into a thick bone fist made up of thousands of white bones. Then, it fiercely smashed towards the ground. Rumble, the bone fist descended, causing the earth to shake and the ground to cave in. Even the place where everyone was standing seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. The Bone Devil ancestors' attacks caused the men in black to scream. Even the Half-Lu-Wus and the Black Flame Azuras were unable to take a single blow before being blown apart by the Bone Devil ancestors' massive fist. An intense aura of death surged into the bodies of these black-robed men. It actually turned them into skeletons, and they fell to the ground. Bastard! Powerful experts no weaker than the 3 bamboo hat men charged toward the Bone Devil ancestors group with savage expressions. The battle was intense, the sounds of fighting and clashing stellar energy ringing out incessantly. In a few short moments, the air was filled with a bloody mist and the ground was covered in corpses. Even though they had Song Yuani, Siegwanding, the Black Een ancestor, the Bone Devil ancestor, the Myriad Ghost ancestor, the Elders of the Righteous and Evil Paths, and many unaffiliated martial artists, the overall strength of the men in black was far from what these martial artists could compare to. Their martial arts were fierce and tyrannical, blazing like wildfire. Moreover, their martial arts were completely different from the martial arts of the martial arts world. To the experts of the martial arts world, who were accustomed to the difference between the righteous and evil paths, these strange and powerful martial arts were impossible to defend against. It's our turn. Clang. As the battle reached its most intense, Wang Chong took 2 steps forward and raised the Origin Immortal Sword. Enormous waves of energy surged out of it. This divine sword was far stronger than Wang Chong had imagined. And after his battle with Bagushidu, Wang Chong was getting more and more proficient in using the Origin Immortal Sword, and he was gradually beginning to understand how to use it. These men in black are truly like maggots in one's bones. They're everywhere, but it's about time for us to counterattack. Wang Chong's eyes flashed with an extremely sharp light as he gazed at the densely packed men in black advancing on them. When one could no longer endure, there was no need to endure. Now that he had recovered all his energy, his illness had been cured, and he had the divine sword in his hand, he had nothing to worry about. Master, this is for you. I got it from the sacrificial altar. Leave the rest to me. Wang Chong tossed over the bottle he had obtained from the sacrificial altar, and then, dragging the Origin Immortal Sword behind him, he charged forward like a god of war, unstoppable and unstoppable. Ping! At the same time he stepped out, the earth trembled, and a powerful aura swept out from his body like a storm. Bang! Wang Chong's eyes flashed with cold light, and he transformed into a twisting bolt of lightning that vanished. Boom boom boom. 100 feet away, a violet streak barely visible to the naked eye flashed through the air. A moment later, there was a series of explosions as Wang Chong's Origin Immortal Sword drew a long arc through the air. Wherever this arc passed, the men in black were blown to pieces by destructive energy. In just a few short moments, the men in black had lost 10 some experts, and this was only the beginning. Without the slightest warning, the black-clothed men who had been slaughtering the martial artists and fighting with the righteous and evil paths suddenly let out panicked screams, their bodies trembling as if they had lost control of themselves. And what was most uncontrollable was the stellar energy in their bodies. Boom! Like a river flowing into the ocean, the stellar energy in the bodies of the Black Flame Azuras began to uncontrollably surge out of their bodies, transforming into a sea of smoke that surged into Wang Chang's body. Thud thud thud. In the blink of an eye, the bodies of the men in black withered and collapsed to the ground. Their cultivations were all poured into Wang Chang's body. The great yin-yang heaven creation art. This was the number one art of the evil path, and now that Wang Chang had recovered his energy, it was even more powerful than before. Rumble! A fierce wind erupted from Wang Chang, and a powerful attractive force erupted from him. By relying on the enormous power of the Origin Immortal Sword, Wang Chang's great yin-yang heaven creation art had reached the subtle realm, and its power had increased by more than one level. Thud thud thud. The men in black screamed, their bodies seething with black smoke as they collapsed to the ground, trembling. Bastard! On the other side, the third bamboo hat man, who had been using the greater void step to wander around like a ghost, suddenly turned his head, his eyes cold. Hey, it's you! You actually dared to come knocking on my door! An extremely sinister and sharp light flashed through the third bamboo hat man's eyes. He had noticed Wang Chang when he first arrived at the core, but with the three great immortals present, the third bamboo hat man did not dare to act rashly. But now it was a different matter. In this place, even if Wang Chang grew wings, he would not be able to escape. If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Clang! There was a shrill metallic whistle as the third bamboo hat man vanished into the void. Crack! In the depths of the void, a slender whip, as sharp as a blade, left a dreadful scar in the air as it lashed at the motionless Wang Chang. The black metal whip in the man's hand possessed a powerful stellar energy-piercing ability that could easily tear apart a martial artist's stellar energy, even tearing them in two. Humph! At this sight, Wang Chang suddenly smiled. This was not his first time encountering this man in black. He had been the one to fight him in the underground river. But at that time, Wang Chang's strength had been greatly reduced, and he was in danger of cultivation defect, so he had been forced to avoid him. Now, even Bagushidu had died to him, let alone the bamboo hat man. Perfect timing. Wang Chang's lips slowly curled into a smile, and then his body flickered. Before the bamboo hat man could arrive, Wang Chang had already taken the initiative to attack. Bang! In a flash of light, Wang Chang's body vanished into the void. Far behind him, rumble! An enormous wave of psychic energy as heavy as a mountain struck the invisible third bamboo hat man in the air. The greater void step was far faster than the one Wang Chang had obtained from the man in black. In terms of pure speed, Wang Chang was simply no match for the third bamboo hat man. Alas, Wang Chang didn't need to go through so much trouble to deal with the third bamboo hat man. His tangible psychic energy far surpassed that of a subtle realm expert. The third bamboo hat man's greater void step was completely useless against him. Ah! In an instant there was an explosion in the depths of the void, followed by a series of screams that caught everyone off guard. Before the third bamboo hat man could reach him, a hair-thin bolt of violet lightning flashed through the air, imbued with destructive energy as it struck the third bamboo hat man with lightning-fast speed. Bang! Before anyone could react, the third black-clothed bamboo hat man let out a blood-curdling scream and was immediately sent flying like a kite with its string cut. With a bang, he smashed into the wall of the cave that was more than 10 meters high behind the battlefield. In an instant, smoke and dust billowed, gravel flew in all directions, and large chunks of rocks collapsed. The third bamboo hat man had been smashed into the wall by the terrifying power of Wang Chang's sword. Bastard! At the same time, the 30-meter-tall yellow scarf warrior suddenly turned around. As he turned, countless rocks began to fall, all of them stellar energy that had been petrified by his technique. Chapter 1559. The difference in strength between them and the bamboo hat leader was far too great. Even so, after they died, an invisible force continued to expand within their bodies. Their skin, hair, nails, and even the blood flowing out of their bodies slowly turned to stone. "Kid, you truly have a tough life." The bamboo hat leader's resounding voice was like that of a god, echoing over the heavens. Since that's the case, I might as well kill you and put an end to any future troubles. Rumble. The earth quaked as the bamboo hat leader's massive body contained boundless energy. His every movement caused the entire cliff to tremble as if it could not endure his immense strength. However, even though his body was huge, his movements were extremely nimble, and he was extremely fast. Rumble. Without the slightest hesitation, the yellow scarf warrior lunged at Wang Chong with a speed and agility that was completely different from its massive body. His massive fist exploded with golden light, shrouded in destructive torrents as it smashed toward Wang Chong. Rumble. The yellow scarf warrior's fist was fast, but Wang Chong's attack was even faster. In the face of this dreadful attack that could even petrify a martial artist along with their stellar energy, Wang Chong showed no intention of backing down. Now that he had fully recovered his strength, he was even stronger than before. Even in the face of this expert who could fight evenly with Song Yuanyi, Wang Chong was still able to display his sharpness and refused to pass on this responsibility. Art of God and Demon Obliteration. Without the slightest hesitation, Wang Chong immediately used the supreme offensive sword art of the Central Plains. Bzzz. Space shuddered, and then an enormous sword intent surged out of Wang Chong's body like a tsunami. This milky white light filled the world, instantly transforming into a vast beam of sword chi several dozen zhang long that slammed into the mountainous yellow scarf warrior. Boom! Two terrifying energies that surpassed the peak great general level clashed in the air like bolts of lightning. Kacha! A deafening sound rang out, and the entire sky seemed to be torn apart in that instant. An endless gale swept down from the sky like a huge wave, sweeping through the surroundings. Some of the black-clothed men and martial artists didn't even have time to react before they were swept away. However, the result of this seemingly evenly matched battle was completely different from what everyone had imagined. Boom! In the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint, there was a flash of white light, and the majestic milky white sword chi tore through the surging stellar energy around the yellow-scarved strongman's body that was 7 to 8 meters thick and as hard as armor. The magnificent sword chi advanced by leaps and bounds and struck the yellow scarf strongman's thick rock arm. With a miserable scream and a shocking explosion, the yellow-scarved strongman's huge body staggered back. His stone face was filled with horror. Impossible! At this moment, the yellow scarf warrior seemed to have been given a terrible fright. Crash! Just as he was retreating, the huge arm he had thrown out cracked and fell off piece by piece. And this was far from the end. Cack-lack! Even the yellow scarf warrior's body began to crack and fall to the ground. Moreover, through the cracks between the rocks, one could clearly see strands of milky white sword chi that were like strands of hair moving about within his body like spirit snake. Even after the battle was over, the terrifying sword chi and sword intent of the art of God and demon obliteration were still roaming through his body, continuing to wreak havoc. Not only that, the sword chi that Wang Chong had left in his body had caused the bamboo hat leader to completely lose control of the yellow scarf warrior's body for the first time. The destructive power of this sword Dao was far more terrifying than he had imagined. Boom! The yellow scarf warrior's massive body was pushed back step by step, and then it crashed into the wall behind it, stirring up a cloud of dust. What? For a moment all was silent. The bamboo hat men were stunned by this sight and turned their heads, incredulous looks on their faces. The bamboo hat leader's yellow scarf warrior was a top-class technique of their organization, and when used, it possessed boundless strength. The fact that it could petrify a martial artist's stellar energy was proof enough. Other than great immortals, no one else could surpass it. But not even if they were beaten to death could they have imagined that the child of destruction they had been pursuing would possess such terrifying strength. With a single strike, he had destroyed the yellow scarf warrior. Impossible! How could he be so strong? The second bamboo hat man found it difficult to conceal his shock. Of all the people here, he was probably the only one who had not fought with Wang Chong. But the three bamboo hat men were far from the only ones to be deeply shocked. "It's him! It's that fake young Master Qingyang. No, it's that disciple of the demonic emperor. He's also here." The moment Wang Chong saw him, the members of the Jingqi League immediately recognized him. Wang Chong had once used the name of young Master Qingyang and lived with them in the base of the Jingqi League for some time, so many of them were very familiar with him. How could this be? At almost the same time, Song Yuanyi and Xie Guanting also noticed Wang Chong. These two alliance lords had weathered many storms and were composed individuals who would not easily lose their composure even if Mount Tai were to collapse. But as they watched Wang Chong slowly descend from the sky like a flood dragon, the two of them were slightly taken aback. Song Yuanyi, Xie Guangding, and the members of the Jingqi League were all well aware of the strength of these three men in black, especially the yellow scarf warrior. When Song Yuanyi had fought with him, he had also been at an extreme disadvantage. If not for the fact that the Eternal Spring Mantra was adept at defense and possessed incredible endurance, as well as the astonishing rebound force, he would have already been defeated by the yellow scarf warrior. This kid, when did he get so strong? In the roiling fog, the Black Een ancestor and the others also noticed what was going on over there. The Black Een ancestor's battle was extremely strenuous, and he was facing off against several experts no weaker than the three bamboo hat men. Moreover, there were also many half Lu Wus and Black Flame Azuras attacking him. These men in black were simply too powerful. Their techniques and fighting style were completely different from those of the martial arts sects, and they had an endless number of top-class experts. Both the members of the Five Ancestor Alliance and the Jingqi League were bitterly struggling to hold on. Thus, when Wang Chong defeated the third bamboo hat man with a single blow and then defeated the even stronger yellow scarf warrior with a single blow, the yellow scarf warrior became the envy of all. The overwhelming strength displayed by the god of war, as well as the ease with which he fought, instantly became a clear stream that everyone envied in this precarious battlefield. At this moment, the only person who remained unperturbed was Wang Chong. The art of god and demon obliteration. This supreme technique was passed down from the Tang dynasty's war god So Yung-sun. It was a supreme sword Dao that allowed one person to defend a city and deal with thousands of foreign invaders. It was unimaginably difficult to cultivate, and one would need several decades to reach major success. Ever since Wang Chong had obtained it, he had only been able to reach minor success in it. In ordinary realms like the true martial realm or the profound martial realm, minor success in the destruction sword Dao was more than enough. But at the peak of the Saint Martial realm, or even the half-step subtle realm, minor success in the destruction sword Dao was far from enough. In normal circumstances, Wang Chong would need several decades to cultivate this technique. But the great Yin-Yang Heaven creation art, the mysterious Origin Immortal sword, and a small portion of the Origin Immortal art allowed Wang Chong to convert his stellar energy into god and demon obliteration stellar energy. This allowed Wang Chong to bypass the extremely difficult cultivation of the God and Demon Obliteration Sword, allowing him to reach major success in the Destruction Sword Dao for the first time. Each of the 10 supreme techniques of the Central Plains had their own areas of expertise. Although the great Yin-Yang Heaven creation art was powerful, it was only in terms of increasing one's internal energy or targeting one's stellar energy. In terms of true offensive power, only the art of God and demon obliteration could allow Wang Chong to fully display his stellar energy. If that's the case, Wang Chong calmly landed on the ground, his body surging with energy. As he scanned the place where the yellow scarf warrior had fallen, there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. He was still not very familiar with the art of God and demon obliteration. Because the time was too short, he could not completely grasp this unparalleled sword technique. But as time passed, He became more and more familiar with the art of god and demon obliteration, and was gradually able to bring out the power of this unparalleled technique. A thorn has appeared. It seems to be the child of destruction. Right at this moment, a cold glint flashed through the masked man's eyes, and he suddenly spoke. They had almost complete control over the entire battlefield, suppressing both Song Yuanyi and the Black Yin ancestor. Only Wang Chong had been defeated in a single clash by the 3 bamboo hat men, and not even the powerful yellow scarf warrior had been able to suppress him. The man with the 3-eyed deer mask had fought with Wang Chong before. In the core of the Origin Immortal formation, he had almost been able to capture Wang Chong, but not even he had expected that Wang Chong, who had been lost to the 3 bamboo hat men, would appear here and defeat the powerful yellow scarf warrior in a single blow. Goat Immortal, go. Since the yellow scarf warrior can't complete his mission, kill him. Just when the man with the 3-eyed deer mask was about to step forward, a vigorous voice came from the side. The man with the golden-red tiger mask had spoken, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. The 3 of them had stood side by side, not taking part in the battle this entire time. One reason was because of their status, but the other was that they were standing by, ready to eliminate a thorn like the child of destruction at any moment. I know. He's just an ant. Let me end him. The man with the 4-horned goat mask, or rather, the goat immortal, faintly smiled at Wang Chong. As he spoke, he took 2 steps forward, his expression disdainful, and his body began to exude a terrifying energy that caused the world to pale. Chapter 1560. The appearance of a mysterious youth had caused the war in the southwest to undergo an earth-shaking change. The Uzun army, which had initially been virtually invincible, suffered successive defeats in the span of a single night, losing 50 to 60,000 soldiers. One had to admit that while everyone had been excitedly thinking about completely wiping out the Annam Protectorate and flattening the Tang dynasty's western front, this had given them all a rude awakening. No one knew the origins of this mysterious youth. Even Jiao Sero and Fenjie had only met him once. But now, Uzun Prime Minister, who had never even seen him or even participated in any of the battles, was saying that he already knew the identity of this youth. Prime Minister, is what you say true? Fenjie's face was filled with shock. He had heard of this Prime Minister of the Uzun Gari royal lineage for a long time, only knowing that this youth possessed extraordinary intelligence and abilities. The punishment operation, that the Tang dynasty had jointly launched with Zhangzhou Jianxiong and several other prefectures, had ultimately ended in failure because of this youth. Fenjie didn't understand Dalun Ruozhen, but he understood the other side. No, the capital's Zhangzhou Jianxiong. Zhangzhou Jianxiong was a man of great ambition. He had always wanted to establish himself in the southwest and use his achievements to enter the imperial court. Moreover, under Zhangzhou Jianxiong's leadership, the relationship between the Tang dynasty and Meng Shizhao had not been so stiff, and the two sides had even had a honeymoon period. Back then, Zhangzhou Jianxiong had also encouraged Meng Shizhao to borrow Meng Shizhao's military strength to ally with the two sides and attack the plateau. But in the end, none of these operations had succeeded. It was not Uzun Great General Huashu Wuzong, but this Prime Minister of the Uzun Empire's Ngari royal lineage, who had managed to make someone as ambitious as Zhangzhou Jianxiong settle down and guard the Annan Protectorate for several decades, but this Uzun Empire's Ngari royal lineage. I've long heard that the Prime Minister of Uzun has 9 acupores in his mind and is extraordinarily intelligent. Every one of them is knowledgeable. They are familiar with all the classics of the Central Plains and have also received the secret enlightenment method of the Great Snow Mountain Temple. Cicadas feel the autumn wind before it blows, and they know the meaning of autumn when a leaf falls. I used to think that it was more or less an exaggeration. If this Dalun Ruozhen can determine that kid's identity just by listening to a few words, then it's really scary. Fengjia's eyes flashed and countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Uzun had 4 royal families, 4 prime minister and 1 prime minister. Daluan Ruozun was just one of them. If Daluan Ruozun really had this kind of ability, then the other 3 prime ministers and the one who served the Tsenpo were truly frightening. At this moment, a hint of fear emerged in Fengjie's heart. Imperial Father borrowed the strength of Uzun to deal with the Tang dynasty, but Uzun himself is a wolf, and an extremely vicious one at that. If in the future Mengshi Zhao and Uzun shed all pretense of cordiality, the empire would be in dire straits. In truth, Fengjie had always been reserved about borrowing the strength of the Uzun Empire to make it difficult for the Uzun cavalry to advance. Although he couldn't be considered to be vehemently opposed, he wasn't very enthusiastic either. At the very least, he was a little conflicted. The more powerful Uzun's general and minister abilities were, the more conflicted Fengjie felt. Haha, Crown Prince Jie, what do you think? At some point, Daluan Ruozun had walked over and was looking at Fengjie with a smirk on his face that seemed to contain a deeper meaning. It's nothing. Prime Minister is overthinking things. Fengjie's heart chilled and he hastily regained his composure. He knew that this Prime Minister was extremely perceptive and that his thoughts were even more terrifying than he had imagined. That brat's origins are unknown. If we can learn his identity and use his weakness to deal with him, that would be the best. Fengjie is willing to listen to Prime Minister's wise opinion. Ha, in truth, this isn't that difficult. Although I've never seen the youth you speak of, nor have I participated in any of those campaigns, I don't know how he commands an army. However, if we just want to determine his identity, it really isn't that difficult. I already know everything about him. Daluan Ruozun fanned himself as he paced back and forth, attracting everyone's attention. When it came to military affairs, one was civil and the other was military. Wherever Huishu Wizong was present, he rarely interfered. Most of the time, it was a matter of strategy. The art of war and strategy are all secrets of the families of ministers and generals. These are not things that an ordinary outsider can learn. Moreover, you said that he was wearing Wang Fu's armor. At this point, Daluan Ruozun smiled and continued. There are only 2 true commanders of the Annam Protectorate that Wang Yan leads. One is Wang Yan, and the other is his eldest son, Wang Fu. These 2 are the true commanders of the army. Military affairs are a matter of great importance to the country. Which ordinary soldier would dare to casually pass on the armor of their commander? They wouldn't even dare to think about it. As soon as that youngster appeared, he took the king's talisman and wore his armor. If he wasn't from an illustrious family, rich or noble, and full of confidence, how would he dare to do such a thing? Prime Minister, forgive me for saying too much, but there are countless descendants of nobility and wealth in the entire Tang dynasty. If this is all, I'm afraid that it isn't enough to deduce the identity of that youth, right? Jelifeng, the ruler of Mengshizhao, said with a frown. In truth, she was also rather curious about that youth. However, this curiosity wasn't admiration. Rather, it was a desire to extinguish any threat as quickly as possible. The Tang dynasty of the Central Plains had far too many talents, practically innumerable. Wang Zongxi, Geshu Han, Gao Xianji, Zhang Shogue, Zhangqiu Jianqiong, Wang Yan, Xianyu Zhongtong. There were far, far too many. And now, at this crucial moment, there was another mysterious youth, who was extremely skilled in the art of war. With such a powerful empire by their side, it was hard to eat or sleep well. No one knew when the Tang dynasty would be dissatisfied and send troops to destroy Mengshizhao, or change the dynasty and install a new emperor. This was also one of the reasons why Jelifeng wanted to rebel against Tang. As for the dangers from the Tang dynasty, especially those that could be seen, he wanted to nip every single one of them in the cradle as soon as possible to prevent them from growing into a bigger problem. The exclusive video of the Tang dynasty's god of war So Young Sun 1 has been uploaded. Everyone is welcome to follow. Add the WeChat account and search for Huang Fuqi. Click on the profile picture and you will be able to view it in the history. Smiley face, haha, if that's all, of course it wouldn't be enough. Dalian Ruozhen chuckled, then continued. But Huashu Wuzong also said that the ones commanding the army last night were not Wang Yan or Xianyu Zhongtong. Two of the highest commanders of the Tang dynasty joining hands to launch a sneak attack on Jiao Sero was definitely not their style. To be able to command both Wang Yan and Xianyu Zhongtong at the same time, just think about it. Who else could do that? Everyone fell silent. Huashu Wuzong and Jelifeng both sank into deep thought. None of them had considered what Dalian Ruozhen had just said. Even Fenjie and Jiao Sero were stunned. In fact, in terms of curiosity, in terms of wanting to know more about that young man, no one was more eager than them, who had been defeated by him twice. But they really hadn't thought about what Dalian Ruozhen had said. Wang Yan is still secondary, but Xianyu Zhongtong is someone that fellow Zhangqiu Jianqiong chose. That fellow only chooses people based on loyalty. Wang Yan might hand over his military authority, but Xianyu Zhongtong definitely won't hand over his authority so easily. Unless, 1. As if a ray of light had just flashed through everyone's mind, everything suddenly became clear. Unless that person was appointed by Zhangqiu Jianqiong. In that instant, the same thought flashed through everyone's mind. That's right. In such a short period of time, why would Xianyu Zhongtong hand over his authority? And why would he listen to that youth and work together with Wang Yan to ambush Jiao Sero? In this world, it's not that there aren't people who can order Xianyu Zhongtong around and make him lower his stance, but there are definitely only a handful of them. And Zhangqiu Jianqiong is definitely one of them. I dare say that child definitely has a letter from Zhangqiu Jianqiong. Dalian Ruozhen waved his fan, his last words resolute and decisive. As soon as he finished speaking, the room became deathly silent. At this moment, even the emperor of Mengshi Zhao, Jelifeng, was speechless. Dalian Ruozhen had never even met the other party, but from a few words, he had deduced that the other party had a letter from Zhangqiu Jianqiong. And yet, even Jelifeng felt that what he had said was probably true. But how could Zhangqiu Jianqiong hand over his letter to someone else? That fellow has a suspicious personality and wouldn't easily hand over his authority to someone else. On top of that, given how formidable the other party is, to be able to force Zhangqiu Jianqiong to hand over the letter to him, how could we have never heard of him before? Ha ha ha, this is where things get interesting. A bright light shone in Dalian Ruozhen's eyes. In his view, there was no longer any chance of changing the outcome of the war in the southwest. Last night's battle had only been a coincidence. The torrential rain, the darkness of night, and the fact that the Mengshi Yusang army had not arrived at the same time had resulted in this outcome. But in the end, the fate of the Annam Protectorate had already been decided from the very start. What he was interested in now was this mysterious young man who had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Who says that we haven't heard of him? It's just that His Majesty might not know of him. Of course, Zhangqiu Jianqiong wouldn't hand over his letter to someone else, let alone have Xianyu Zhongtong voluntarily hand over his authority. But if it's someone who's close to Zhangqiu Jianqiong and has the same interests, then there won't be a problem. For example, the Wang clan, Wang Yan's youngest son, and the person who built Lion City. Boom! Dalian Ruozhen's final verdict was like a stone stirring 1,000 ripples. Everyone felt as if a fierce gale had swept through them, their minds raging with great waves. Even Huashu Wuzong's heart was in turmoil. Not many people knew about the youngest son of the Wang clan, but there was no one who didn't know about the person who had built Lion City and created this huge problem for Mengshi Zhao and Uzun. And Fenjie and Jiao Sero, who had already met Wang Chong, were even more shocked than anyone else. How could it be him? Chapter 1561. Gift. Bai Siling and Zhao Yadong glanced at each other, speechless. It was clear that neither of them had expected Wang Chong to make such a move. Very soon, the two of them turned around and looked at the soldier who was carrying the two cages. Their eyes were filled with curiosity. Wang Chong had not given them a gift yet, so the two couldn't help but be filled with anticipation. The soldier quickly rushed over and placed the cages on the ground. "These are Persian cats?" The two pulled back the silk cloth and saw two furry and pure white creatures inside. Their eyes brightened and their faces lit up. Wang Chong had actually given them two of the most popular Arabian Persian cats in the capital. In the capital, from the princes and dukes of the imperial household to the nobility, all the women of the officials and the young ladies of the great clans loved the Arabian Persian cats the most. These Persian cats had docile and clingy personalities, making them extremely likable. As a result, they became the new favorites of the women of the officials and the young ladies of the wealthy clans. However, Arabia was tens of thousands of li from the capital, and Persian cats were far too precious to be tossed about. Thus, the majority of them died on the journey. As a result, there was no market for them in the capital, and a single cat was hard to find. And of all the Persian cats, the pure-colored Persian cats raised especially for the imperial household were the most respected and were known as the imperial Persian cats. The two Arabian Persian cats that Wang Chong had found for them were snow white without a single blemish. Their pupils were also very special, one deep blue and the other amber. With a single glance, one could not help but want to pull them into one's embrace. They were the most precious royal Persian cat. The two had only seen them once at Princess Anai Huang's place, and neither of them had expected Wang Chong to give them such a special gift. "So cute! So pretty! Look, it's still using its paws to wash its face and scratch its beard. Yeah, look, it's actually licking my hand. Haha, it's so itchy." Both of their attention fell on the Persian cats in the cage. They squatted on the ground and kept playing with them. As for Wang Chong, he was momentarily forgotten by them. Although Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong appeared valiant and heroic, and were known as heroines, different from the delicate women of the boudoir, they were still girls in the end. They also liked those furry and cute little pets. Wang Chong had done the right thing by catering to his need. "Fortunately, I made the right choice this time." Wang Chong smiled inwardly when he saw this. He had asked Yang Hongchang to bring these two Persian cats of the Arabian royal family from Talas. Yang Hongchang had operated on the Silk Road for many years and knew quite a few Arab merchants. Those Persian cats were very difficult for others to obtain, but they were no problem for Yang Hongchang. The Arabs were innately skilled merchants, and as long as the price was right, they could even obtain a royal Persian cat. "That's right, Wang Chong. Don't Persian cats die very easily? And they're not used to the climate of the Tang dynasty. Just how did you get them?" A moment later, seemingly recalling something, Bai Xiling stood up with the white Persian cat in her arms and gazed at Wang Chong curiously. "Give me 100,000 taels and I'll tell you the answer," Wang Chong teased. "Bastard!" Bai Xiling's eyebrows rose as she prepared to strike. "Haha, alright, don't hit me. I'll tell you. Persian cats love cleanliness, so their cages must be cleaned promptly, and they have to be very clean. If they're not clean, they won't eat. In addition, they need to be occasionally squeezed out some grass juice." Wang Chong chuckled. Persian cats loved cleanliness even more than humans, and from a certain perspective, they were a sort of misophobe. Not many people knew about this, and the people who sold Persian cats were mostly greasy merchants who didn't take enough care of them. This was why so many Persian cats were dying. If they knew about this, it would be much easier to sell Persian cat. After settling the two cats, the guards from the two clans that Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong had brought were also arranged to join the City of Steel's defense forces. On this trip to Wushang, Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong had brought many experts from their clans. The combined forces of their two clans numbered more than 500. This was quite a powerful support. The Zhao and Bai clan's support for Wang Chong was self-evident. That's right, Wang Chong, you've prepared everything, so why didn't you put all your effort into building the city? Why did you build those buildings and inns instead? Bai Siling couldn't help but ask after circling the city once. That's right, this city is too big. Such a large place is bound to take a lot of time and effort to build. How come you don't seem the least bit worried? Zhao Yadong chimed in. As the two strolled around with Wang Chong for so long, they gradually began to notice a strange phenomenon. Wang Chong's city of steel had clearly slowed down after building the lowest foundation and the first floor. A large number of people had been sent into the city to build inns, restaurants, and tea houses for traveling merchants. This seemed very abnormal. Moreover, Wang Chong, as the master of this city, did not seem to be in the slightest bit worried. This made the two feel very strange. The two were not trying to pressure Wang Chong, but there were times when they had to give an account to their clans. Moreover, the two had come this time to probe Wang Chong and also to see how the construction of the city was progressing. After all, the Zhao and Bai clans had invested a great deal of money into Wang Chong's city of steel, paying a great price and blood. Haha, to do a good job, one must first sharpen his tools. Relax, the construction of this city will be completed much faster than you imagine. Wang Chong grinned. How could Bai Siling and Zhao Yadong's thoughts be hidden from him? When the two spoke, their expressions were clearly distressed. They had clearly been forced. Everyone had their own difficulties, and it was already quite good that Bai Siling and Zhao Yadong had helped him this far. Wang Chong naturally would not make things difficult for them. And you can tell your clans that the benefits the Zhao and Bai clans will obtain will be far greater than they imagined. In addition, this city will be completed in a month. Wang Chong said. Ah! Bai Siling and Zhao Yadong stared in shock at Wang Chong. It wasn't that they didn't believe in Wang Chong, but that this city of steel was still an embryo, far from completion. Moreover, the construction of a city was time-consuming and laborious. It would already be quite impressive if it could be completed in a year. And Wang Chong's city was much larger than an ordinary city. Even though they were Wang Chong's closest friends, the two of them still felt that completing this city in a month was a fantasy. Wang Chong looked at their questioning gazes, a strange smile on his lips, but he did not reply. Facts spoke louder than words. In a month, the two of them would no longer think that he was exaggerating. Moreover, at that time, even Geshu Han and Foman Linta will be shocked. Wang Chong inwardly chuckled to himself as he gazed at the sky. The city of steel had been making such a huge ruckus, but Foman Linta, Geshu Han, Gao Xianji, and Sishun had still not made a move. They had only sent a few scouts to investigate, but they had done nothing else. This was rather abnormal. Wang Chong was well aware of what these great generals were planning, but alas, they would not have the chance. Time slowly passed, and 10 days later, the second batch of 50,000 craftsmen and experts from the great clans arrived to reinforce the city of steel. The second batch of components forged by the sword smiths and sword shops of the various provinces of the Tang dynasty had all arrived. On the same night, once all the rock eagles, gerfalcons, eagles and storks in the sky had dispersed, all the scouts lingering around the city of steel and the Arab and Karak Spazinu spies disguised as merchants had left, Wang Chong finally began his plan. Boom! In the darkness the earth quaked. With Wang Chong's order, a blazing furnace spat out from the northeast corner of the city of steel, and then a second, a third, a fourth. Tens of thousands of blazing furnace fires began to spread from the northeast corner of the city of steel to every corner of the city of steel. In the end, the blazing furnace fires illuminated the city of steel as if it were daytime. Begin. On the southern wall, Zhang Shouji stood shoulder to shoulder with Wang Chong, his expression grim. He swung down one arm and boom! The heaven-shaking clattering of steel came from all around. All the 100,000 craftsmen and all the soldiers stationed around the city of steel stopped their work and joined in the construction of the walls. From the moment Zhang Shouji had first arrived in Wushang, a sea of steel modules had been gathered around the city. After these modules had been used to construct the foundation of the city, they had not been touched. The majority of the craftsmen began to devote themselves to the construction of the restaurants, inns, and tea-houses in the city. But at this moment, as if it had been premeditated, the craftsmen began to move the steel modules and began to collectively construct the city like ants. Clang! The first hammer fell, sending sparks flying and echoing far into the darkness. Tens of thousands of modules of the City of Steel began to rise in the darkness. In this period of time, all the craftsmen had become familiar with the blueprints and construction methods, and now, all of this was beginning to show its power. Boom! 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 The clattering of steel shook the heavens, converging into a tide. In the light of the furnace, the tens of thousands of modules of the City of Steel were neatly constructed like fish scales, following some sort of pattern. The nearly 100,000 craftsmen worked together like a single person, all of them working together like a massive and intricate machine, constructing the city with astonishing speed. On the walls, Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong were left slack-jawed by this majestic and spectacular construction, as well as the formidable ability to coordinate and command. Impossible! Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong both came from great clans, and extremely ancient clans with a long history. In terms of strength and resources, they far surpassed the great clans of the capital. With this background, one could easily imagine the breadth of knowledge and horizons that Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong possessed. But not even Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong had ever seen such a magnificent sight. More than 100,000 people working in perfect formation, even more orderly than an army. This was unimaginable in the great clans. Moreover, the method Wang Chong had used to construct the city was completely different from what the world had imagined. Chapter 1562. But now that he carefully thought about it, the Tang dynasty had once had a chance. As long as he seized that chance, the Tang dynasty would have had a chance to obtain a large number of high-quality warhorses and prepare for future battles. And that chance was this Turkic horse merchant called Hulayeg. However, finding Hulayeg was not easy, as his movements were erratic. He could be in the steppe of the north, the Anshi Protectorate, Talas, the Abbasid Caliphate, or even the Uzun Plateau. Wang Chong had only found Yang Hongchang, an old horse who knew the western regions like the back of his hand. Coupled with the few bits and pieces of information he had gathered, as well as all sorts of legends, Yang Hongchang had begun to search for him more than a month in advance. This was how he had been able to track him down. Even more frightening was that Wang Chong was well aware that, starting from now, in at most 3 months, everyone would lose this chance. This was because Hulayeg would quickly offend Ishbara Khagan through his pride and be completely exterminated. And without Hulayeg, no one else would be able to obtain a large number of high-quality warhorses from the Turkic steppe. No one else would be able to act like Hulayeg and open up a channel for the horse trade between the eastern and western Turkic Khaganate. From then on, the name Hulayeg became extinct in the western regions and the steppe, and not long after his death, the two Khaganates completely cut off the trade in warhorses. The Tang dynasty thus lost its last chance, and from then on, it was plunged into a crisis of lacking warhorses. Thus, when Wang Chong heard that Hulayeg was in the western regions, he immediately rushed over. There were some things that had to be done sooner rather than later. If he missed it, it would be gone forever. Who are you? Don't you know that this is my territory? Hurry up and get out. An angry rebuke in Turkic interrupted Wang Chong's thoughts. In the room, Hulayeg had an angry expression on his face, his right hand already pressed against the scimitar at his waist. It seemed like he was ready to strike at any moment. Hulayeg. Wang Chong chuckled. Who are you? How do you know my name? Hulayeg's expression froze, and then he paled. He had always used an alias in the western region, so only a few people knew his real name. Most of them were his acquaintances. But he didn't remember knowing the young man in front of him. Hee, don't panic. I was introduced here. Chuckling, Wang Chong took out an item from his waist. This was a black metal token. It was pitch black like ink, and there were monsters carved on it. It was completely different from the style of the Central Plains. Obviously, this wasn't something from the Central Plains. Oh, so you're from the Yang family of the Tang dynasty that Tamuge introduced. Hulayeg raised his sword-like brows and instantly relaxed. His right hand released the hilt of the scimitar at his waist, but a look of contempt appeared on his face. Tamuge is really interesting. Doesn't he know that I've never had any dealings with Han people? The Turks and the Han are natural enemies, so he actually wants me to sell a horse to a Han? How laughable. Ha ha, alright, I don't care where you came from or what you want to do here. While I'm still in a good mood, hurry up and get out of here. Beauty, come, let's keep drinking, ha ha. Hulayeg hugged women to his left and right as he drank to his heart's content, the red wine dripping down his beard. He had completely forgotten about Wang Chong. Ha ha ha. Wang Chong couldn't help but laugh at these words. Not getting angry, he sat down across from Hulayeg. In the past, when Maodun surrounded Gaoding, Emperor Gaozu of the Great Han was trapped and had no choice but to deliver 10,000 ingots of gold. In the end, Maodun retreated and Bai Deng collapsed. Even the chief and the Kaghan were like this, but I didn't think that Hulayeg would have such strength of character. He's even more upright than the Kaghan and doesn't love money. This one admires you. Ha ha ha, interesting, interesting, interesting. It seems I've underestimated you. Hulayeg had been sitting on the ground, drinking wine, when he heard Wang Chong's words. His eyes brightened and he suddenly raised his head, as if he had just noticed Wang Chong's existence. All of you, get out of here. Hulayeg's eyes widened, and the beautiful girls in his arms paled in fright. Screaming in fear, they scrambled out of the room. So you've come to deliver 10,000 ingots of gold to me? Hulayeg stared at Wang Chong said. Maodun besieged Gaoding was an event that both the Central Plains and the Turks knew of 1,000 years ago. At the time, Emperor Gaozu of the Great Han, Liu Bang, had just begun his conquest of the world, commanding an army of 1 million and commanding as many officers as there were clouds in the sky. He was feeling very pleased with himself when he happened to run into the Turks invading his borders. In the end, he led his army forward, and after encountering Maodun's 200,000 cavalry, he was trapped at Bai Deng. This was the first time in the history of the continent that a large-scale force of pure infantry had encountered a force of pure cavalry. Although there seemed to be more infantrymen, everyone knew what it meant to have 200,000 cavalrymen. In the wilderness, it wouldn't be difficult to wipe out 1 million infantrymen. This was the power of a cavalry charge. It was also from that moment that the Central Plains began to truly understand the power of a large-scale cavalry force, and they began to buy horses, herd them, and raise them on a large scale. Everyone knew the final result. By the time of Emperor Wu of Han, for the sake of resolving the siege of Bai Deng, he had established a massive army of cavalry of the Great Han. Fighting north and south, he had swept through the Turks and utterly routed them to the north of the Heavenly Mountains, where they were unable to recover for several hundred years. They had even changed the name of Maodun's massive steppe tribe from Xiongnu to Turk, so as to show that they had nothing to do with that humiliation. This greatly increased the might of the Han clan, and everyone knew this. Thus, even though there was the siege of Bai Deng, neither the Central Plains nor the Turks feared it. In fact, from a certain perspective, the Turks were even more apprehensive. However, this was clearly not what Wang Chong was trying to express. The Central Plains had always believed in the concept of family, country, and world, but the steppe was different. Even a legendary ruler of the steppe like Maodun Chanyu had been bribed by 10,000 taels of gold. Wasn't it laughable for Hulayeg to say that the Turks were at war with the Tang dynasty and thus wouldn't sell horses to the Han? Business was business, and regardless of the relationship between the Tang dynasty and the Turks, Hulayeg was a Turkic horse merchant who could roam the western regions like a fish in water. He would never care about any standpoint, nor would he care about patriotism. What he cared about was only one thing, and that was benefits. As long as there were enough benefits, he would probably be able to sell out Ishbarakagan. What is 10,000 taels of gold to you? The mighty Hulayeg, the largest horse merchant of the steppe, the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates have so many high-quality war horses. Surely you don't just want to earn 10,000 taels of gold? Wang Chong indifferently said, a pleased expression on his face. Buzz! A bright light flashed through Hulayeg's eyes as he stared at Wang Chong for 3 seconds. Suddenly, he put on his open robe, a serious expression finally appearing on his face. It seems like I underestimated you. Your ambitions are truly not small. Hulayeg's tone suddenly changed, completely different from before. Speak. How many war horses do you want? 3,000? 5,000? 8,000? 10,000? Wang Chong broke into laughter, but he only shook his head. 20,000? Hulayeg's face flickered. The people who came here to buy war horses usually bought 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, or 5,000. Anyone who could buy 5,000 at once was a major client. After all, 5,000 high-quality Turkic war horses was enough to form a cavalry army of 5,000, a considerable number. As for 20,000 taels of gold, he had yet to sell them. If this Han youth could buy 20,000 war horses, Hulayeg would have to admit that he had greatly underestimated him. Ha, 20,000? Sir Hulayeg, aren't you looking down on me too much? Could it be that Sir, the #1 horse merchant of the Turks, is only able to buy so few war horses? Wang Chong faintly smiled. The first batch of Wushang soldiers he had trained numbered 5,000, and these were the best cavalry. The nimbleness they had trained in the mountains and the extreme speed of their war horses allowed them to maximize their advantage. A qualified Wushang horseman could make 16 turns in a second, slash 11 times, and even duck through a horse's belly 3 times to get to the other side. These abilities were not something that could be described with the words riding a horse, sitting steadily, or cavalry. Not even the Turkic elites, who were hailed as the elites of horseback, were capable of such feats. They were the best cavalrymen and also the strongest cavalrymen. Wang Chong had to equip all 5,000 Wushang soldiers with war horses, and Wushang village still had 50 to 60,000 people. From this aspect, Wang Chong needed at least 50 to 60,000 war horses, and in the future wars, the Tang dynasty would lose a large number of war horses. For the sake of reserves, a conservative estimate suggested that he would need at least 300,000 to 400,000. In truth, Wang Chong estimated that if it was for the sake of the Tang dynasty, it would be best if he could get 700,000 to 800,000. The more the better. As long as it's on the steppe, there's no warhorse that I, Hulayeg, can't get my hands on. Sir, hurry up and tell me, just how many war horses do you want? Hulayeg's face instantly turned red from Wang Chong's provocation. As a horse merchant, he could say anything, but his ability to sell horses could not be underestimated. This was also Hulayeg's Achilles heel. At least this number. Wang Chong faintly smiled, and to Hulayeg's shock, he raised 3 fingers. 300,000! 300,000? Are you kidding? Hulayeg blurted out in alarm. Even if he was experienced and had interacted with various factions, he would not be able to match up to Hulayeg. He had never sold so many war horses before. Moreover, 300,000 was not a small number. In the past, Hulayeg had only been able to freely buy and sell war horses because he didn't have a lot of them. Throwing them onto the steeds of the steppe didn't mean much. Moreover, the war horses would breed every day, so no one would notice if some of them disappeared. But 300,000. Only a blind man wouldn't be able to see this number. Even the Khan would probably notice him. So that's how it is. It seems like I've misjudged you. So Sir Hulayeg wasn't the person I was looking for. Seeing this, Wang Chong suddenly sneered. He had originally intended to stay here, but now, as soon as he finished speaking, he stood up and, under Hulayeg's dumbfounded gaze, turned and left. Chapter 1563. Wait a moment. Sir, please wait a moment. I didn't say that it was impossible. Seeing that Wang Chong was about to walk out the door, Hulayeg grew anxious, knocking over the silver plate of grapes in front of him as he hurriedly followed. If there's a problem, there's a problem, there's a problem. Why are you in such a rush to do business? Does this mean that Sir is confident that it can be done? Wang Chong stopped and turned to ask. This. I just feel that the number is a little too large and a little difficult, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible. If you give me half a year. Not half a year, 3 months at most. Wang Chong said. Sir, are you serious? Hulayeg said. Wang Chong gave a serious nod. It wasn't that he didn't want to give him time, nor was he being too harsh. It was that this bastard would be dead in 3 months. What use would there be in making a deal and signing a pile of treaties? Of course, Hulayeg himself definitely wouldn't be able to sense this. Moreover, Wang Chong didn't really have any hopes of getting 700,000 or 800,000 warhorses from Hulayeg. That was simply impossible. Unless the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates were insane, they would never allow such a massive cavalry army to appear in the Tang dynasty. And raising 700,000 or 800,000 warhorses was no small number. The Tang dynasty simply didn't have such a large pasture to graze on. In truth, let alone 700,000 or 800,000, even 300,000 was a number that Wang Chong had casually mentioned. Getting 100,000 warhorses from Hulayeg was already a massive harvest. The Tang dynasty had never bought so many warhorses before. It wasn't that they didn't want to part with the money, but that they simply didn't have the means to do so. At the very least, the Khans of the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates wouldn't be so foolish as to openly sell so many warhorses to fund their opponents. Let me think it over. This isn't the place to discuss business. Sir, please follow me, Hulayeg said, his expression turning much more cautious. 300,000 warhorses was no trifling matter, and far too many aspects were involved. Hulayeg had to proceed with caution. Hulayeg did not leave through the main entrance of the pleasure house, but through a special winding path on the 3rd floor. This winding path was a dead end on the outside, but there was another path on the inside. It was winding and dark, leading straight to the surface. No wonder it's so difficult to track him down. As Wang Chong followed Hulayeg down the winding path, he couldn't help but sigh. Hulayeg was the #1 horse merchant of the Turks, and many people knew of him, but very few of them had been able to find him. In fact, many legends about his whereabouts and past were spread after his death. Otherwise, even Yang Hongchang, who traveled the western region all year round, would not be able to find his whereabouts, let alone others. After entering the pleasure house, Wang Chong emerged from another tea house nearby. From there, they boarded a bronze carriage. The carriage passed through the dense crowd and went back and forth in the winding alleys. Finally, they entered a mansion that looked ordinary from the outside but was extremely luxurious from the inside. Upon entering the residence, Hulayeg did not lead Wang Chong to the reception hall or inner chambers. Instead, he opened a secret door and took Wang Chong to an underground passage. Sir Hulayeg, where are we going? A few moments later, Wang Chong suddenly said as he followed behind Hulayeg. We're here, we're almost there. This is the place. Hulayeg, who was leading the way, suddenly turned his head. Clang! With a metallic clatter, a thick and heavy metal fence weighing at least several thousand jin dropped from the sky, blocking the path between Wang Chong and Hulayeg. Wang Chong's brow creased, but before he could say anything, boom! Another thick and heavy metal fence descended from the sky, blocking Wang Chong's path. For a moment, Wang Chong was like a turtle in a jar, trapped between the two fences. Sir Hulayeg, what are you doing? Wang Chong asked, but there was no hint of panic on his face. Ha ha ha! Hulayeg heartily laughed, a cunning and crafty light in his eyes. The young Marquis of the Tang dynasty. I didn't think that we would meet here. Who could have expected that you would disguise yourself and run off to the western regions? If I hand you over, I'm sure that many people will be willing to pay a high price. At the very least, the Tsempo of Uzun and His Highness the Crown Prince of Mengshizhao will definitely be willing. Hulayeg finally tore off his disguise and revealed his true face. Wang Chong's expression froze for a moment, and then a hint of solemnity appeared on his face. When did you recognize me? Wang Chong said. He had to admit that the development of this matter had somewhat exceeded his expectations. Wang Chong had not expected Hulayeg to recognize his disguise. This number 1 Turkic horse merchant was far more cunning, crafty, and cautious than he had imagined. Ha ha, 300,000 warhorses? Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? Anyone who comes to me to do business can buy 8,000 horses at most. Even the king of the Sher Kingdom, who's said to be the wealthiest person in the world, only bought 5,000 horses from me at one time. With such a large number and such a serious attitude, do you think that an ordinary person can afford this? To be able to name a number of 300,000, you're definitely not from the western regions, but from the interior of the Tang dynasty, and you have a close relationship with the Tang dynasty. However, those Han people in the Great Tang imperial court would never come here to do business with me. The western regions have been abuzz recently with news that the young Marquis, the one who was personally conferred the title of the young Marquis by the Holy Emperor of the Tang dynasty, who defeated Huishu Wuzong, Daluan Ruozhen, Jelifeng, and Duan Guchuan in the southwest, has come to Qixi and built a city of steel there. I've looked into it, and the young Marquis described in the legends looks exactly like you. Young Master Wang, am I correct? With these last words, Hulayeg had a smug look on his face, looking nothing like his usual boorish and unsophisticated self. I truly underestimated you. A trifling horse merchant actually has such intelligence and insight. It's no wonder you've been able to roam the western regions like a fish in water for so many years. It seems that I'll have to learn a lesson in the future. Wang Chong shook his head and couldn't help but chuckle. Even the wise are bound to make a mistake. Wang Chong was forced to admit that he had truly underestimated Hulayeg. However, even if that's the case, do you really think that you can trap me with just these things? Wang Chong glanced at the 2 heavy metal fences, a smirk on his face. He truly had not expected Hulayeg to recognize him, but this was no simple miscalculation. At times, when one's martial strength reached a certain level, there was no need to care too much about one's opponent. This was especially true outside of the battlefield. Ha ha, the mighty young Marquis of the Tang dynasty, a martial arts expert who massacred 10,000 people on the divine mountain of heaven in the southwest. How could I possibly be careless? If I didn't know this, why do you think I would insist on bringing you here? A crafty light appeared in Hulayeg's eyes. Many people believed him to be careless, but they didn't know that he was just hiding his true strength. Although he was in the business of selling horses, it was fraught with danger. Gathering information, understanding all the famous figures of the world, as well as potential trading partners, was something that a qualified horse merchant had to do in advance. I know that you're very strong, and I also know that you have a Wuzi steel sword, but it's useless. Do you see those fences around you? Those are the finest steel I got from Arabia. This steel is incredibly tough, and it doesn't even need to undergo any special processing to be made into the sharpest Arabian saber or sword. Even if you have a Wuzi steel sword, no matter how sharp your Wuzi steel sword is, it still won't be able to cut through these fences. In addition, do you know why I've said so much to you? It's because I know that you won't be able to escape. No. You're dead for sure. At this point, Hulayeg heartily laughed. The mighty young Marquis of the Tang dynasty, The man who had recently shaken the world and attracted the attention of the world, had finally died at his hand. This was something to be proud of. If the Kage knew, he would probably heavily reward him. Wang Chang's eyes were half closed, his expression calm as he silently gazed at Hulayeg with a smirk on his face. Since you know that I have a Wuzi steel sword, do you know how sharp my sword is? Wang Chong suddenly said. Buzz! Hulayeg's laughter came to an abrupt halt. Sharp? There's no need. Once you're dead, I'll personally find your sword from your corpse and test it out myself. Okay, you can go in peace. As he spoke, Hulayeg suddenly stamped his foot on the ground nearby. Clang clang. He could hear the sound of gears turning, and then the ground suddenly emptied, revealing a massive, bottomless hole. Before Wang Chong could react, he and the fence began to plummet into the abyss. No, this was no longer a fence. It was now clear that the place where Hulayeg had led Wang Chong to stand was actually a massive cage, and the fence that had fallen down was a part of this cage. When Hulayeg opened the trap, Wang Chong and this massive cage began to descend into the ground. What a formidable trap! The wind howled on both sides as the scenery around him receded like a stream of light. As Wang Chong descended from the ground, even he had to admit that Hulayeg's trap was far more elaborate than he had imagined. Hulayeg's goal was not to use the cage to trap Wang Chong, but to trap Wang Chong and then throw him into this bottomless pit. Even if he didn't die from the fall, he could be trapped underground. No matter how capable Wang Chong was, as long as he couldn't break free of the cage, he would be denied food and water for 10 days, and his death was assured. These thoughts flashed through Wang Chong's mind, and he quickly regained his composure. The cage fell very quickly, and in just a few moments, Wang Chong could no longer see the entrance to the pit. His surroundings were pitch black, making it impossible to determine his bearings. Chapter 1564. Gujulai, what are you planning to do? Don't forget, that brat is a marquis of the Tang dynasty. Do you dare to act against him? A Hu general called out from the crowd. Haha, you might be afraid of him, but I'm not. Gujulai stood on the hollow metal table, his expression savage and his eyes gleaming with a savage light. As long as you dare to follow me, I'll teach him a lesson. He's just a half-grown brat, and the hair on his mouth hasn't even grown out yet. Do you want to listen to him? And don't forget, how did Lord Fomenlinta treat you in the past? Did he give you all any good missions? Now is the time to take revenge for Milord. Don't you want to take revenge for Milord? That's right. Milord has shown us great kindness. If we don't take revenge for Milord, won't we be the same as those cowardly Han? That's right. Take revenge for Milord. So what if the Imperial Court ordered it? We should submit a memorial to the Imperial Court and have them release Milord. At the mention of Great General Fomenlinta, everyone was instantly moved by Gujulai. Haha, good. As long as you follow me, let's not talk about killing him. At the very least, I'll make it so that he can no longer have a foothold in the Chishi Protectorate and Scram. In the territory of the Hu, we Hu should be the ones in charge. Gujulai saw that it was about time and immediately began to encourage them. Good. Well said. In the territory of the Hu should be the ones in charge. Gudu Li's words made the blood of the group of people boil. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire hall was filled with a thunderous roar, as if there was a landslide or a tsunami. Milord, what do we do? The cheers of the crowd rose from the hall, passing through the roof and spreading far, far away. Several hundred meters away from the Protectorate headquarters, several cavalrymen had gathered together. One of the young Hu turned his head and uneasily looked at the Hu general behind him. This is troublesome. Heba Yi pretended not to hear, his eyes fixed on the distance. Gujulai was one of Fomenlinta's trusted aides, but he did not have any real power at first. However, with his identity as a trusted aide and his ability to motivate people, Gujulai's reputation in the Chishi Protectorate was even higher than that of the commander of the Uzun defense line. In addition, Gujulai's views were completely different from his. This was also the reason why he did not enter the hall. Wang Chong isn't as easy to deal with as you think. Heba Yi recalled the scene of Wang Chong charging through the triangular gap, leading the 5,000 Wushang cavalry and sweeping through everything before finally killing Dian Mangpoj. A chill ran through Heba Ye's heart. That youth from the City of Steel's Tang dynasty was definitely the most frightening opponent on the battlefield. He would rather be his ally than his enemy. Let's go. Heba Yi turned his horse around and quickly disappeared in the direction of the Uzun highlands. Meanwhile, as carrier pigeons flew to the various borders, the news that Wang Chong had become the new Chishi Protector General began to spread. Unlike the complicated reactions in the Chishi Protectorate headquarters, the news was much simpler in the various borders of the Tang dynasty. What? The City of Steel's Wang Chong has become Chishi Protector General? In the Anshi Protectorate headquarters, Gao Xianji's eyes widened in disbelief at this news. How could this be? How could those old officials of the court agree? Putting aside everything else, his martial arts aren't even at the peak of the Saint Martial realm, and there are so many experienced generals in the army. Were they all rejected? The old officials of the court truly didn't agree, but the King of Song stood his ground and recommended him. In addition, his martial arts truly aren't enough, so he's only temporarily acting Protector General, not the true Protector General. In addition, I've investigated. Feng Chongqing was standing not far from Gao Xianji. He looked up at his commander, hesitated for a moment, and then continued. After a moment of hesitation, he continued, just before the imperial court's order, he ambushed the Black Wolf Yabgu at the Chishi Armory and killed Agudalan, as well as the 5,000 Turkic elites Agudalan had brought with him. Buzz. Gao Xianji shivered at Feng Chongqing's words, but he quickly calmed down. Wang Chong had just killed the Uzun Brigadier General Dian Mangpoj at the Battle of the Triangular Gap and annihilated the White Braves that had intimidated the western regions. In a little more than a month, Wang Chong had killed the Black Wolf Yabgu and Agudalan. In less than 2 months, 2 of the most famous generals of Chishi had died at Wang Chong's hands. At this moment, not even Gao Xianji could say anything. When the all is in the bag, it's obvious at the end. It seems like the light of the youngest son of the Wang clan can't be concealed. Gao Xianji sighed. At this moment, his heart was filled with emotions. He was not a Han, so his background was completely different from that of the other Han generals. From an ordinary infantry soldier to the current Anshi Protector General, Gao Xianji had put in so much effort, so much blood, and so much effort. Just to stand out among Fomin Linta's subordinates and escape his control, Gao Xianji had experienced countless dangers and barely escaped death. This was completely different from Wang Chong's meteoric rise, reaching the position of interim Protector General in just a year. Even Gao Xianji had to admit that he was a little jealous, feeling like the new waves of the Yangtze River were replacing the old. But even so, Gao Xianji had to admit that Wang Chong's current accomplishments had not only been due to his birth and luck. The talent, and art of command that he had displayed in these past few battles had been transcendent and outstanding. Even an imperial great general like Gao Xianji had been stunned. Wang Chong's abilities truly had reached a level that far surpassed his peers. Even Go Xianji himself, at the age of 17, couldn't compare to Wang Chong. Not only that, my lord. If that Wang Chong becomes the acting Chishi Protector General, many of our strategies will have to change. We can no longer simply suppress and resist. Chishi is responsible for transporting our supplies and soldiers, and in the future, we will need to make many requests of them, so we will have to interact with them. Feng Chongqing said, a hint of apprehension in his eyes. At the start, although Wang Chong was a member of a clan of ministers and generals, the grandson of Duke Jiao, the son of Heaven's disciple, and the young marquis, this was still the western border, a place far away from the emperor. There were many things that Gao Xianji and Feng Chongqing did not care about. But now that Wang Chong had become the acting Qixi Protector General and seized control of the road to Qixi, everything had changed. They had to admit that the imperial court's order had truly caught them off guard. Neither of them had expected this. Gao Xianji said nothing, but his thick brows creased. It was clear that he was thinking the same thing as Feng Chongqing. But Milord does not need to worry too much. There are many who in Qixi, and the young marquis still has a very long way to go before he can truly become Protector General. Once he has overcome this trial, we can consider getting in touch with him. Feng Chongqing said. That's all we can do. Gao Xianji gave a long sigh. At the same time, in the distant Big Dipper city of Longxi, the news that Wang Chong had become Qixi Protector General caused a stir that was no less shocking than the one in Anxi. A 17-year-old Imperial Protector General? How could there be such a thing? Not only was it approved by the Imperial Court, even His Majesty has permitted it. Geshu Han was in a state of shock as he held the news from the capital. Not even when the King of Generals of the Uzan Empire, the White Lion Great General Witadra Konglo, had appeared had he been so shocked. That was because it was truly too surprising. He had been paying attention to the debate in the Imperial Court this entire time. So many officials had recommended so many experienced candidates for Qixi Protector General, but Geshu Han had never expected that the final result would be the unthinkable of the Northwest, Wang Chong. In truth, it wasn't just Geshu Han. All the officers of the Big Dipper army at his side were in a state of deep shock. When the news from the capital reached this place, it was like a deep water bomb, giving everyone an unprecedented shock. Unbelievable! In just 1 year, he became Qixi Protector General. There's also the Qixi Armory established by the imperial household in Qixi. Our Big Dipper Protectorate Army needs to go there every year to collect equipment. In this way, our Longxi Big Dipper Army will be under his control in the future. Did I hear it wrong? Protector General. With his current achievements, his name will probably be left in the annals of history, admired for thousands of years to come. But isn't he too young? Why did the Imperial Court approve it? This won't convince the masses. Convince the masses? Do you still think he's an ordinary young man? In the War of the Southwest, he killed more than 400,000 soldiers of the Mengshi Yusang army, and now he's killed Dian Mangpoj and Agudulan, and countless Uzan and Turkic warriors have been buried with them. He's a god of death. Do you think that the Imperial Court just casually recommended him? His current achievements aren't something that the Imperial Court can ignore just because it wants to. In the hall, every officer of the Big Dipper army was deeply stunned. When Wang Chong had first arrived in Wushang and begun to build the City of Steel, everyone had treated him as an outsider. Even though he had made heaven-shaking contributions in the Southwest, in the eyes of everyone else, he was still a half-grown brat. A single success didn't prove anything. Sometimes it was luck, sometimes it was chance. It didn't mean that one's strength was extraordinary or outstanding. Perhaps it was just a flash in the pan. But no one could have expected that Wang Chong would not only build the massive City of Steel in Wushang, but he would also make great contributions, defeating the Uzan, defeating the Turks, killing important generals like Dian Mangpoj and Agudulan, and finally ascending to the position of Qixi Protector General. Chapter 1565. Wang Chong had never seen the Anxi Protectorate Army before, much less come into contact with the strongest army of the western regions. But at this moment they had used their own methods to leave the deepest impression on Wang Chong. This was the backbone of the Tang dynasty. Clang! In a cold flash of light, Wang Chong unsheathed the sword at his waist and pointed it at the Arabs. All soldiers, hear my order! Attack at full speed. Boom. The earth quaked as Wang Chong gave his order. A moment later, the more than 100,000 Qixi reinforcements that had been standing motionless atop the hills suddenly began to pour toward Talas. Kaiyil! Kaiyil! The first to charge out from the hills was the invincible great General Li Sai and his 5,000 Wushang cavalry, all armed to the teeth. Clang! A dazzling war halo erupted from beneath Li Sai's feet and rapidly spread to cover the entire army, and then a second, a third, a fourth. In the blink of an eye, thousands of war halos had erupted, enveloping the entire Wushang army and turning the 5,000 Wushang cavalry into a moving fortress. Boom! The 5,000 cavalry charged forward like a storm, their momentum enough to shake the heavens and overturn the seas. Not even an army of thousands would be a match for them. Kaiyil! Kaiyil! Following closely behind the Wushang cavalry was the second echelon of cavalry from the Qixi Protectorate and Annam Protectorate, their halos beneath their feet as they charged down from the hills like a flood toward the distant battlefield. Behind them were thousands of chariots and troop transports, pulled by war horses as they galloped into the distance. All the war chariots and transport vehicles maintained a strict formation even during the charge. There was not the slightest bit of disorder. Charge! At the same time, on the left and right flank of the army, more than 10,000 regular soldiers of greater and lesser valor, Gonka people, and other mercenaries of the western regions roared and charged out. 1 wave, 2 waves, 3 waves, more than 100,000 people from the Qixi Protectorate were like a surging ocean, surging over a hill, covering the mountains and plains, and charging into the distance. The Tang people! It's the Tang people! Get ready! Quickly change direction. East, gather quickly! Infantry, raise your shields! All cavalry, prepare to attack! Screams resounded through the army. In the face of the simultaneous charge of more than 100,000 soldiers of the Tang dynasty, the Arabs, who had been attacking the city of Talas in an orderly fashion, instantly fell into chaos. Wang Chong's previous judgment was flawless, and at this moment, it appeared without any error. When more than 300,000 Arab soldiers were focused on besieging the city of Talas, it was almost impossible to gather the army in a short amount of time. A small ship could easily turn around, but a large ship could not. This string of orders caused the more than 300,000 Arab soldiers to fall into chaos. Get ready! Gather! Just when the Qixi Protectorate was preparing to charge, a dignified and loud voice rang out from the easternmost side. This voice instantly silenced the chaotic battlefield. On the eastern side of the battlefield, the disorderly Arab soldiers seemed to have been summoned, calming down and rapidly gathering. Second, the third formation, retreat. The 10th formation, advance. Boom boom boom. With this clear and precise order, one Arab infantry after another stepped forward, their massive infantry shields firmly planted on the ground. Each of these shields was nearly as tall as a man, sturdy, and these countless shields formed a steel wall on the eastern edge of the battlefield. Behind this steel wall, the disorderly army regained its order, and square formation after square formation formed into countless formidable defensive formations. In a few short moments, more than 30,000 infantry and 40,000 cavalry had gathered on the eastern edge of the battlefield. This force was enough to deal with more than 100,000 enemies. Rumble! At this moment, the earth rumbled as the 70,000 soldiers parted like a wave. An Arab general with a majestic aura like a storm slowly rode out from the rear. He wore a golden-crowned hat and golden armor, and he was mounted on a sturdy red Arabian steed. He was like a god as he appeared before everyone. The surrounding Arab soldiers lowered their heads in respect and awe at the sight of this general. Umar. He was one of the most famous generals of the Arabian Empire's east, as well as one of Governor of the East Abu Muslim's most valiant generals. In the Arabian Empire, he had another name, Arabian Arrow. Umar was famed for his iron and blood. He had once led the empire's warriors in exterminating tensome foreign countries and scorching their land. In the east, he wielded immense authority and rallying power. The appearance of Umar caused the soldiers to calm down, as if they had found their pillar of support. Even Abdullah and the 7,000 cavalry, who had been forced to retreat, quickly calmed down and rejoined the army. Under Umar's command, the soldiers gathered together like a ball of fire. The chaos was obliterated, replaced by a vigorous energy that made Umar's figure seem even larger. "All soldiers, hear my order. Stop the enemy with all your might. Anyone who retreats will die." Clang! A dazzling and sharp saber was raised over his head, gleaming with cold light. Umar's eyes were like lightning as his thunderous voice resounded over the battlefield. "Yes, General Umar. We swear to serve General to the death." The 70,000 Arab soldiers roared in unison, their voices echoing over the battlefield. In just a few moments, the Arab soldiers on the east side had finished adjusting and taken up a defensive formation. Even Wang Chong couldn't help but show a hint of concern in his eyes. The Arabs were the only faction in the world that could threaten the Tang dynasty, a faction that could stand on equal footing with the Tang dynasty. Moreover, based on their quick reactions, the Arabs displayed a fighting power that Mengshi Zhao and Uzun could not compare to. Very fast reactions, but it's useless. A harsh light flashed through Wang Chong's eyes. The Arabs truly were a stronger opponent than Mengshi Zhao and Uzun, but the Tang dynasty had single-handedly restrained Mengshi Zhao, Uzun, the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates, Goguryeo, and many other powerful existences. This battle would decide who was the strongest empire in the world. "Hiya!" Wang Chong squeezed his steed's abdomen and charged down from the peak of the hill. Rumble! The earth quaked as the more than 100,000 Chishi reinforcements surged into the distance like a massive wave. Cavalry and infantry covered every corner of the battlefield, the distance between the two sides shrinking. "Ready!" At the same time, the Arabs gave their orders. Clang, clang, clang. Massive spears were mounted on shields, their tips aimed at the charging Tang dynasty soldiers. Behind these shieldmen were abnormally large Arab warhorses, their hooves thundering in the wind. The tens of thousands of Arab cavalry on the backs of these horses were all bulging with muscle, their eyes abnormally vicious as they stared at the enemy, fully prepared for battle. Arabia was a country of war, and it was precisely through constant war and conquest that it had become the largest empire on the continent. No matter what kind of opponent they faced, the Arabs would never easily retreat. Offense is the best defense. This was a principle that every Arab firmly believed in. The Tang dynasty soldiers were getting closer and closer, the galloping of hooves growing more urgent. The Arabs were leaning forward, their veins bulging, a sign that they were about to strike. The atmosphere on the battlefield was extremely tense. 300 steps, 200 steps. The Tang people were getting closer and closer, and when they were only 100 steps away, countless black halos shot out from beneath the feet of the Arabs. These halos were completely different from the Tang dynasty's halo of thorns. Each of these halos was branded with a black hexagram, and these tens of thousands of black halos joined together, transforming the 70,000 Arab soldiers on the eastern side of the battlefield into a terrifying black fortress. Rumble! Ney's horse neighed as 20 to 30,000 Arab cavalry charged like a storm from the rear. At almost the same time, clang! The 5,000 Wushang cavalry charged forward with the clear cry of their swords. Boom! Under the watchful eyes of countless people, there was an earth-shattering rumble as the two armored horsemen collided heavily with each other at the speed of lightning. At that moment all was silent. Heaven and earth were silent, and even time seemed to have stopped. In a few short moments, screams filled the air as countless Arab cavalry were tossed into the air like scarecrows, flying more than 100 feet into the air. The 5,000 Wushang cavalry led by Li Sai were like a sharp sword stabbing into the tens of thousands of Arab cavalry. The Arab sabers and swords slashed at them from all sides, but they were all blocked by the meteoric metal on the Wushang cavalry and repelled. All soldiers, hear my order! Charge with me and kill them all! Those who offend the Han will be executed, no matter how far away they are. Li Sai's eyes blazed with light as he became like a fierce tiger. With a furious roar, he raised his massive Wuzi steel sword and cleaved an Arab horseman and his horse in two. No armor could stop the sharp Wuzi steel sword. Bang bang bang! One collision after another resounded over the battlefield as the Wushang cavalry charged forward. The tens of thousands of Arab cavalry were no match for the 5,000 Wushang cavalry. Like dominoes, they were knocked down and trampled by their horses. Chapter 1566. Marquis, you were looking for me? Zhang Shouji respectfully bowed in front of Wang Chong. After 2 days of battle, the busiest person in the Tang dynasty army had been Zhang Shouji. In the 2 days of battle, the busiest person in the Tang dynasty army had been Zhang Shouji. He was the highest civil engineer in all of Talas and one of the most formidable in the entire Tang dynasty. Whether it was the construction of the 2 steel defense lines or the several hundred steel catapults on the walls of Talas, Zhang Shouji had personally built all of them. From the southwest to the northwest, Zhang Shouji's role was only getting more and more important. One could say that even though he didn't know any martial arts, his importance in all of Qixi was probably second only to Wang Chong. This is for you. You should strengthen the 2 defense lines. As Wang Chong spoke, he took out a blueprint and handed it over. This was a blueprint that he had redesigned after the conclusion of the battle, based on the current situation and the characteristics of the 3 sides. Other than Wang Chong, Zhang Shouji, and a few of his core disciples, no one else could understand these blueprints. Relax. Leave this matter to me. Zhang Shouji glanced at the blueprint and quickly nodded. The military situation was urgent, and the lives of more than 100,000 soldiers were at stake. Zhang Shouji did not dare to tarry. He took the blueprint and hurriedly left. Li Sai, I'll leave the matters here to you. Strengthen the defenses and keep an eye on the movements of Uzun, the Western Turks, and the Arabs. If anything happens, inform me at any time. Once Zhang Shouji had left, Wang Chong continued to issue orders. This general will go, Li Sai sternly said. Sukai Chin Bin. Hurry up and repair the ballistae. Prepare for battle at any moment. Yes, Marquis. The pair loudly replied. After taking care of everything, Wang Chong passed through the gates of Talas with a wave of his sleeve. Talas had sentries every few steps and all kinds of military fortresses, bazaars and halls, all constructed of massive stone. Although it was not as luxurious or beautiful as the Great Tang of the Central Plains, it had its own grandeur. Moreover, from the layout of the city, one could faintly see that this strategic economic and military center on the Silk Road of the western regions had once been a prosperous city. Lord Protector General, this way, please. Milord and General Wang are already waiting inside. Upon seeing Wang Chong, an officer of the Anxi Protectorate Army respectfully greeted him. Wang Chong nodded. Lead the way. After passing through the corridors, Wang Chong saw the armored Gao Xianji in the main hall of Talas. At his side were Qing Qianli, Shi Yuanqing, Wang Chong's father Wang Yan, his big brother Wang Fu, and the new Karluk chiefs Guli and Ferganan. The moment they saw Wang Chong enter, everyone turned to look at him. Haha, Wang Chong, you've come. We were in the middle of our calculations, and everyone else is here except for you. Gao Xianji had been in the middle of a discussion with his generals, but when he saw Wang Chong, he immediately walked around the model of Talas and went up to welcome him, a relaxed smile on his lips. The others didn't react when they saw this scene, but a brown-bearded man with a powerful aura beside Qing Qianli had a shocked expression on his face. Gao Xianji had a proud personality, and in the western regions, he was known as the Anxi war god. All the tribal chiefs had to lower their heads in front of Gao Xianji. He had followed Gao Xianji for 10-some years, but he had never seen him so courteous to anyone. No, this was no longer just being courteous. From the fact that Gao Xianji was willing to personally welcome that young man in front of everyone, it was clear that in Gao Xianji's mind, this young man was of the same status and importance as him, an existence that Gao Xianji viewed as equal. "I've kept you waiting." Wang Chong paid no attention to anything else. After returning a bow to Gao Xianji and exchanging some pleasantries, he strode up to the model of Talas in the center of the hall and began to examine it. This model was completely different from the one Wang Chong had used in Qixi. The details were much more detailed and complete. Creating a model was a basic ability of a general. Sometimes, it was possible to see through a sandbox and see a general's abilities. The Anxi Protectorate Army's battle model has been meticulously planned out, from the terrain around Talas, the hills and valleys, to the small ravines of the battlefield. Everything has been taken into account. From this, Gao Xianji truly lives up to his reputation as the wall of the Tang dynasty, the Anxi war god. Wang Chong pensively gazed at the model. "My lord, I'm too polite." As Wang Chong was examining the model, he suddenly heard a soft voice in his ear. This voice was coarse, deep, and heavily accented. One could tell at a glance that it was a Hu. Wang Chong turned his head and immediately saw a boorish face with a particularly striking brown beard. Wang Chong said nothing, only gave him a questioning look. "This one is the leader of the Ferganan Banahan, paying respects to Lord Protector General. In the future, when Lord Protector General has the time, I hope that you will come to our Ferganan for a chat. Banahan will definitely be waiting for you." Banahan gave a slight bow, an extremely respectful expression on his face. "It's him." Wang Chong hadn't paid much attention at the start, but upon hearing the name Ferganan, a hint of surprise flashed through his eyes. Only with Wanha Peluo and the Karluks as the vanguard could the loyalty of an ally of the Tang dynasty be even more apparent. In the entire history of the Tang dynasty, Ferganan and Banahan were extremely rare, loyal allies of the Tang dynasty. Whether in times of triumph or defeat, they would remain unswervingly loyal to the Tang dynasty. Even after the defeat at Talas, they had not wavered in the slightest. In a place like the western regions, where the culture of the Central Plains was uncivilized and the countries liked to sway left and right, this was an extremely rare and precious trait. Wang Chong instantly had a good impression of him. "Kagan is too polite." Wang Chong faintly smiled, a thought emerging in his mind. "Since this is our first meeting, this one just so happens to have a gift for Kagan." Banahan had originally intended to make a simple greeting, but these words immediately piqued his curiosity. "I heard that the Khan has a great flame crow technique, which is a secret technique passed down in the palace. But because of its long history, coupled with the internal strife of the palace and various other reasons, the technique is incomplete, so it is difficult for the Khan to make further progress. I have an incantation that may be able to help the Khan complete the Great Flame Crow technique and help the Khan break through the bottleneck and reach a higher level." Wang Chong faintly smiled. "Lord Protector General, is this true?" Banahan's eyes widened at these words, a look of pleasant surprise on his face. He didn't dare to believe his ears. There was such a thing? At this moment, even Gao Xianji couldn't help but lean over. Wang Chong silently smiled. There was truly no need to doubt the Farahan's loyalty, but as the chief of the Farahan tribe, Banahan's strength was not very famous in the western regions. Even Wanha Peluo was firmly above him. This could only be described as a pity. Wang Chong had read a few records, so he knew that the crux of the problem lay in the legendary Great Fire Crow art of the Farahan tribe. This legendary art had become incomplete due to a famous internal conflict within the Farahan tribe, resulting in the Farahan Kagan's accomplishments being extremely limited. This problem persisted until the future Great Calamity arrived, when all of the martial arts were gathered and mutually verified. Only after everyone's wisdom and experience were gathered was this problem solved. It was only when Wang Chong saw Banahan's Farahan Kagan that he suddenly realized this point. Whether it's true or not, we'll know once we try, Wang Chong said. Calling over a guard, Wang Chong brought over a brush, ink, and paper. He quickly wrote down the mnemonic for the great fire crow art on paper and gave it to Ferdinand. Banahan treated it like a precious treasure. After this small interlude, everyone turned their attention back to the sand table. Although we've won the battles of the last 2 days, we still can't let our guard down. The first to speak was Qing Qianli. As the Vice Protector General of the Anxi Protectorate Army, Qing Qianli had a great deal of authority on the battlefield. Dalawan Ruozan still hasn't retreated, and Abu Muslim still has his main force. Most importantly, he still hasn't personally entered the field. We don't know how many moves he has up his sleeves, or how many soldiers he has in reserve. The words soldiers in reserve instantly caused the mood in the hall to turn heavy. Everyone knew that the Arabs loved to fight, and Talas was too close, allowing them to recruit soldiers from the rear at any time. In truth, the Arabs had been recruiting soldiers this entire time. This was why, in the 2 months that the Anxi Protectorate Army had been fighting with the Arabs, Abu Muslim's soldiers had only been increasing, not decreasing. When Wang Chong had arrived at Talas, there were still more than 300,000 soldiers stationed outside the walls. The hall was quiet, but in the end it was Wang Chong's father, Wang Yen, who broke the silence. Although the Arabs have come with a ferocious momentum and the battlefield is closer to them, numbers are not the only things that matter in war. There is also overall strength, training, cooperation, strategy, tactics, logistics, and all other aspects. From these considerations, I believe that there is no need for everyone to worry too much. The urgent task at hand is to discuss how to deal with the alliance between the Uzan, Western Turks, and Arabs. My opinion is the same as Lord Father's. Abu Muslim has still not retreated. If we don't thoroughly defeat him, this war can't be considered over. Wang Chong's big brother, Wang Fu, also spoke up at this moment. Abu Muslim is not that easy to deal with. I've fought with him for more than 2 months, so I have some understanding of him. He likes to constantly test the waters, using high-intensity attacks to assault his opponents like a tide until his opponents will crumble and he strikes fear into their hearts. And even if his opponent doesn't lose, he will gradually grasp your weakness through these constant attacks. In the end, he will personally strike and use his overwhelming advantage to deal a fatal blow to finish off his opponent. Gao Xianji suddenly interrupted. His expression was solemn, and there was a hint of warning in it. Moreover, the Arabs worship battle. No matter how many people they lose, as long as Abu Muslim does not give the order to retreat, they will never retreat, much less give up. To the Arabs, as long as they can defeat their opponents and conquer their country, they don't care about the price. In this aspect, they are completely different from the other opponents of the Tang dynasty. Chapter 1567. But, if the city of Talas's myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation is so formidable that not even the behemoth can break it, doesn't that make the Tang dynasty invincible? Huashu Wuzong couldn't help but frown. Haha, it's not that simple. Dalawan Ruozan shook his head and grinned. The myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation at Talas was built more than 200 years ago. 100 years ago, the formation was already rather unstable, and now that the world has changed, the formation is finding it very difficult to absorb enough energy from the earth. At this point, the formation is probably only at 40 or 50% of its original strength. It won't be able to hold out for too long. As long as the Arabs let that behemoth continue to attack, the pressure on the formation will reach its limit. That's when the walls will fall. Dalawan Ruozan's expression was calm and composed, but he exuded a powerful confidence that made others involuntarily trust him. After so many years on the battlefield and facing all sorts of powerful foes, Dalawan Ruozan had long ago developed an extraordinary intelligence and calculating ability. Although the Arab behemoth army was rather surprising, Dalawan Ruozan's abilities allowed him to quickly grasp the rhythm of the battle. It was very difficult for anything to surpass his expectations. "Prime Minister, in your view, how long will that beast need to break the city of Talas?" Duwu Sili's voice came from the side. "If the Tang people can't find an effective method, it won't take more than 5 minutes to finish a cup of tea," Dalawan Ruozan confidently declared. In the distance, the black boar-like behemoth outside the walls of Talas was smashing, shoving, and crashing. Only those who had actually seen it would understand why this behemoth was called the Destroyer of Cities. The speed and frequency of its attacks far surpassed anyone's imagination. In a single second, it had launched at least 5 or 6 attacks on the city. Dense rumbling sounds echoed throughout the city. Everyone in the city felt threatened, their fear reaching a peak. In this city, there was no way for them to escape. Every time the behemoth attacked, it was like a death knell to them. "Kill it! Don't let him get close to the wall." Seeing the concentrated attacks, Gao Xianji, Qing Qianli, Wang Yan, and Banahan were all shocked. The city wouldn't be able to hold on for long if the beasts kept attacking like this. Boom! 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 Countless attacks rained down on the black boar-like behemoth. Gao Xianji, Qing Qianli, Wang Yan, and the other 30,000 great generals were also frantic, and all of them were doing their utmost. "It's useless. The destroyer is different from other behemoth. Any type of attack is greatly reduced against it. What you're doing is futile." In the distance, Mazel inwardly sneered at the sight of the 3 great generals attacking the destroyer. When the destroyer was first created, it had taken into account the possibility that it would be obstructed by some supreme experts during its assault on the city, so its defense had been set to be very high. This was something that the first sower could not compare to. The attacks of Gao Xianji and the others would not be able to inflict any damage on the sower even after the city was breached. Awooh! Just when Mazel's lips curled into a cold smile, he heard a heaven-shaking howl. Mazel's heart trembled as he turned his head. In another direction, the terrorizer was charging. A massive 4-armed god, its body blazing with violet flames, had punched the terrorizer's head several times. The violet flames had latched onto Wang Chang's fists and spread to the terrorizer's body, seeping through the chinks in its armor. The terrorizer's defense was extremely powerful. The scales that covered its entire body were even more resistant to all kinds of attacks than the destroyer to a certain extent. Wang Chong had only needed a few punches to make the terrorizer howl. This was completely beyond Mazel's imagination. He could clearly sense that the terrorizer had been heavily injured and in excruciating pain. Those attacks had posed an enormous threat to it. "This is impossible. This doesn't make sense. No one can inflict so much damage to the terrorizer." Mazel's eyes widened in shock, not daring to believe what he was seeing. "What's going on here?" Let alone Mazel, even Abu Muslim couldn't help but show a hint of shock. There was no need to doubt the behemoth's abilities, and he was sure that something had happened to it that he did not know about. Otherwise, a single great general of the Tang dynasty would never have been enough to make the terrorizer howl in pain. "Li Sai, attack its joints with all your strength. In addition, everyone, be careful of the behemoth's trampling." Wang Chang's furious roar echoed through the plains like a clap of thunder. The god King Yama that he had transformed into hugged the terrorizer's head tightly from the side. His 4 arms took turns to attack, and every punch was filled with his full strength. His conjecture from before had been confirmed. The strength of Lu Wu was apparently very effective against these behemoths. With each punch, Wang Chong could sense powerful life energy flowing from the behemoths into his body. Wang Chang's god King Yama originally only had the strength of a low-level great general, but with the support of the life energy of these behemoths, his cultivation was constantly rising, his strength madly rising from the low-level Great General level to the middle-level Great General level. Not only that, Wang Chang's own strength had also risen from Saint Martial Tier 7 to Saint Martial Tier 8, and he was charging towards Saint Martial Tier 9, the Brigadier General level. If Wang Chong could reach the Brigadier General level, he would undergo a qualitative transformation. Both he and the God King Yama would reach a higher level of power. Roar! Enraged by Wang Chong's attack, the scaled hippo behemoth roared and charged at Wang Chong. But although Wang Chong was still weaker than Gao Xianji and the others, his fighting skills were something that not even a supreme existence like the celestial wolf Great General Dewusili could do anything to, let alone the others. Bang! Wang Chong flipped over, his enormous body flipping from one side of the scaled behemoth to the other. As he landed, he unleashed a torrent of fists at the behemoth. The violet flames grew brighter and brighter, and with each punch, the flame of life on the scaled behemoth's body dimmed a little. This sort of situation had never happened to the Arab behemoth army before. Just who is that bastard? Someone, kill him for me. Mazel was enraged. Master archers! Where are the master archers? It's useless. The attacks of master archers have no effect on this sort of great general. Ziad looked into the distance, his expression incomparably solemn. Let alone Mazel, not even Ziad had expected such a situation to occur. There had to be a reason why the behemoth army had become one of the cornerstones of the Caliph. Not even Ziad, who had reached the great general level through the aid of his ritual tool, was confident that he could deal with a single behemoth. Not even Ziad could explain the situation before him. He could only say that this young great general definitely had something on him that could restrain the behemoth army. Perhaps it was that violet flame, or perhaps something else. This was not good news for the Arabs. Damn it! I don't care if the attacks of the master archers are useful, but that Tang people must die. Whether it's for the Empire or for this war. Mazel pointed a finger at Wang Chong, but his eyes were on Abu Muslim and Ziad, the two highest commanders of the Eastern Army. Mazel's duty was to attack the city, break the stalemate, and destroy the enemy army. As for the experts of the enemy army, they were undoubtedly Abu Muslim and Ziad. Mazel's meaning was crystal clear. The Eastern Sassanid army, especially Abu Muslim and Ziad, must be responsible for eliminating this threat. Relax. He won't survive. No matter what the result of this battle is, he won't be able to return to the East alive. Abu Muslim's eyes were filled with disdain as he spoke, his voice firm and unquestionable. In truth, not a single one of the Tang people you see will be able to leave. But before that, I need you to fulfill our agreement. Destroy the Tang people's defense line and destroy their cities. Abu Muslim gave Mazel a profound stare as he spoke, his meaning clear as day. No matter how one looked at it, it was extremely unwise for Mazel's terrorizer to remain outside the defense line and tangle with an imperial great general of the Tang dynasty. It was also not in line with the Arabs' will. Abu Muslim needed to completely destroy the steel defense line of the Tang dynasty. Without this steel defense line, the outcome of the war would be completely different. The hundreds of thousands of Arab soldiers might have already crushed the enemy. Understood. Lord Governor, be at ease. I will definitely fulfill my promise. Even though Mazel had never cared about what others said, he couldn't help but blush and give a deep bow. Neither the terrorizer nor the destroyer had managed to destroy the enemy's cities and break their defense line. This was undoubtedly a disgrace to the behemoth army. Chapter 1568. Roar! Roar! The behemoth's roars echoed throughout the city of Talas as its massive body continued to press and advance on Wang Chong. Although Abu Muslim's arrow had missed, it was not completely ineffective. While Wang Chong was distracted, the scaled behemoth had seized the opportunity to charge forward. It was now less than 100 feet from the first defense line. Its breath blew against the steel walls with thunderous booms, and some of the closest Tang dynasty soldiers were unable to stop it and were sent flying along with their horses. The arms of Wang Chang's God King Yama wrapped around the neck of the terrorizer as he stubbornly resisted. Although Wang Chong was doing his best, he was finding it harder and harder to hold on. The power of the God King Yama's descent was not limitless. With each passing second, Wang Chong's strength would weaken a little. Wang Chong had been able to stop the scaled behemoth's advance at the start, but now Wang Chong's entire body was being pushed forward. "Damn it!" Wang Chong bellowed, his metal cudgel slamming against the behemoth's head again and again. The violet flames of Lu Wu's strength wrapped around the cudgel and spread into the behemoth's body. With each passing second, the behemoth's vigorous flames of life would dim a little. Boundless vitality poured into Wang Chong's body, but it still could not stop the frenzied behemoth. Although Wang Chong had punched a hole in its skull, this was already its limit. An invisible energy seemed to be stopping Wang Chong, preventing him from advancing any further. Release. On the ground, Chun Bin's right hand swung down once more. From all directions, countless crossbow bolts pierced through the air and shot toward the behemoth in front of them. But this time, a considerable portion of the crossbow bolts bounced off the giant beast's hard scales. Only a small portion managed to penetrate the gaps between the scales. Wang Chong might have stalled the giant beast, but his enormous Yama devil body had also greatly affected the attacks of the ballistae on the ground. Again, Chen Bin's expression remained unchanged as he issued another order. This was the last attack they could launch. The behemoth could leap over at any time. With just one kick, the ballista army would suffer heavy losses. "Zhang Shouji, are you done yet?" Wang Chong's anxious voice resounded in the sky. In a place where no one could see, Wang Chong's face was as white as a sheet of paper. Fresh blood flowed from the web between his thumb and forefinger. Forcefully fighting against a giant beast that he couldn't defeat was a huge burden on his body. Crack! A massive crack spread from the God King Yama's shoulder to his back like a spider's web, all the way to his waist. And these fine cracks were increasing at an astonishing rate on the body of Wang Chong's four-armed God King Yama. In just a few moments, the God King Yama's body was covered in these fine cracks, making it look like a porcelain doll on the verge of shattering. This was a sign that the God King Yama had reached the limit of its endurance and was on the verge of collapse. On the ground, the atmosphere was tense and confrontational to the extreme. All the craftsmen were frantically assembling the ballistae, their faces pale and their scalps numb. "Just a few more moments. Marquis, hold on." Zhang Shouji's anxious voice came from the ground, his beard fluttering in the wind. At this moment, no one knew just how much pressure he was under. Not enough time. Far from enough. Zhang Shouji could very quickly assemble the ballistae, but something like a giant ballista had never appeared in the history of the empire. None of the craftsmen, including Zhang Shouji himself, had any experience with it. This little bit of time simply wasn't enough. Bang! As soon as Zhang Shouji's voice fell, the gigantic scaled beast immediately pushed the gigantic Yama heavenly god forward. The God King Yama's massive heel kicked up a great deal of dirt and sand as it smashed into the steel walls behind it. With a heaven-shaking boom, 7 or 8 steel walls were uprooted and sent tumbling through the air like broken kites. "Retreat! Hurry and retreat!" Cries of alarm resounded through the sky. There was chaos in front of the huge beast as countless soldiers retreated in panic. In front of the behemoth, they were nothing more than ants, so weak that they couldn't even injure it, let alone resist. 7th square formation, 10th square formation, 23rd square formation, all of you retreat. A familiar voice resounded in everyone's ears. It was Wang Chong's. Even though he was in the middle of a fierce battle and had his back to them, Wang Chong was still able to grasp the situation on the battlefield. Even though he was in a perilous situation, his square formation did not fall into disarray. Boom! Upon receiving Wang Chong's order, the army in front of the behemoth began to scatter to the sides. Roar! At almost the same time, the scaled behemoth unleashed its ferocious nature. With a fling of its massive body kicked up a cloud of dust as it shot forward. Aya! Screams filled the air. The seemingly ordinary sand was instantly transformed into the most lethal weapons under the behemoth's terrifying strength. Nay, amidst miserable neighs, warhorses that weren't able to dodge in time were struck by the sandstorm, instantly becoming badly mangled, and their bodies were covered in bloody holes that resembled honeycombs. As for the warrior on horseback, although he was wearing armor, he was still sent flying from the back of the horse and fell heavily. His internal organs were already injured in the air, and he stopped breathing. Even a sneeze from a giant elephant was a devastating blow to an ant. The same was true for the Tang dynasty army in front of Tala's. Manpower was far too insignificant in the face of these legendary behemoths. Damn it! In an instant, Wang Chong's eyes reddened. With no time to think, Wang Chong thrust the 10-meter-long cudgel that had been used to deal with the behemoth into the earth behind the defense line. One end of the cudgel sank into the rock, while the other end pressed against the behemoth's body. In order to avoid heavy casualties, Wang Chong had no other choice. But even so, this was only temporary. The danger to the army was far from over. Kacha! At this moment there was a crisp sound. Under the shocked gazes of countless people, the huge God King Yama's arm was severed at the base. It fell heavily from the sky and landed on the ground, causing a cloud of dust to rise into the air. This was the second arm of the four-armed God King Yama that had been severed. In a place where no one could see, the moment the second arm fell, Wang Chong vomited a mouthful of blood. Marquis. On the ground, Chen Bin, Sun Jiming, Chen Burang, and Zhuang Jingping all paled at this sight. Even though his cultivation level was far from enough, they could all sense that Wang Chong's body was at its limit and that he wouldn't be able to last much longer. But this was not the end. Rumble! The scaled behemoth, the terrorizer, suddenly slammed its head against the God King Yama, sending Wang Chong flying more than a dozen zhang away. Without Wang Chong's obstruction, an empty space of more than a dozen zhang appeared in front of the behemoth. The army was now completely exposed. Not good. Get out of the way. Retreat. Retreat. Army, retreat. Get out of here. We can't hold on any longer. At this sight, the tens of thousands of Tang soldiers fell into chaos. Panic began to spread, and every one of them could sense the thick stench of death. The army, which had maintained its composure a moment ago, was instantly routed. No one could imagine the damage a behemoth could inflict on an army without anyone to stop it. Marquis. The giant ballistae are ready. Everyone, get out of the way. Just as the army was about to suffer grievous losses, a loud shout came from the crowd. Without any warning, the several thousand craftsmen who had been gathered together suddenly scattered, retreating in every direction. In the center of the craftsmen, a massive and heavy ballista had already been assembled. This ballista was more than 10 meters long, and its body was pitch black. Many of its parts were still steaming. These were the parts that had just been forged and were immediately used on the giant ballista. After spending a great deal of time and energy and gathering the strength of the craftsmen, Zhang Shouji had finally completed this giant ballista. Awo! The behemoth roared. Just as the craftsman finished, the behemoth's muscles bulged and it squatted down, its massive head slowly lowering. Its scarlet eyes brimming with the desire to destroy glared at the army below. This was a sign that the behemoth was preparing to attack. Senior Zhang, give us the giant ballistae. The 7th, 10th, 12th, 14th square formation, everyone, advance. The 30th, 38th square formation, load the ballistae. With no time to think, Chen Bin unsheathed his sword and rushed forward, issuing a series of orders. The army was in chaos and everyone was fleeing. The craftsmen and Zhang Shouji were almost out of strength, and Wang Chong had been sent flying by the behemoth. At this time, besides Chun Bin and his ballista army, no one else could stop the behemoth. Bang! Chun Bin and the ballista army's training was on full display at this moment. As soon as Chun Bin's voice fell, the ballista soldiers, who had been preparing to retreat, changed directions and charged at the giant ballista. Several hundred ballista soldiers had a clear division of labor, and there was no chaos. Creak creak. Several dozen Tang Dynasty soldiers worked together to load a 10-meter-long ballista bolt weighing nearly 1,000 jin onto the giant ballista. Boom! A massive foot stomped down heavily, landing in the area within the defensive line. The massive power seeped into the ground through the sole of the foot, causing the ground within the defensive line to tremble. Hundreds of feet away, screams could be heard as hundreds of fleeing cavalrymen were thrown into the air along with their horses. The behemoth had finally broken through the defense line and launched its attack. The army of nearly 100,000 was in grave danger. Fire! Chun Bin finally gave the order to fire. At that moment, time seemed to stop. Everyone held their breath and their hearts were in their throat. The giant ballista had always been an idea that had never been realized. Not even Zhang Shouji, the creator and executor of the plan, knew if the giant ballista would succeed or not, or if the bolts it fired would be able to harm the scaled behemoth, let alone anyone else. Chapter 1569. Bang! Like a dragon emerging from the sea, an earth-shattering boom rang out as a huge arrow broke the silence. It shot out like a bolt of lightning towards the scaled beast in the distance. This arrow carried the hopes of countless people. Even the fleeing mercenaries of the western regions couldn't help but turn their heads, their eyes shining with boundless hope. Several dozen zhang passed, 50 zhang, 30 zhang, 100 zhang time seemed to slow down countless times as the distance between the arrow and the scaled behemoth continued to shrink. 70 zhang, 60 zhang. Boom! As countless people watched, the arrow fired from the giant crossbow struck the scaled armored behemoth's head. Awoof! The moment the longsword hit, the huge scaled beast seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. Its two front hooves were lifted off the ground, and its huge head was thrown back as it let out a painful howl. And its life energy, which had already been rapidly weakened by Wang Chong, was now even more severely weakened. Boom! Cheers shook the heavens as the nearly 100,000 soldiers cheered in excitement. When so many people cheered together, no one could have imagined such a sight. Wonderful! It's working! The giant ballista really is effective against the behemoth. The morale of the entire army soared. Chun Bin and the ballista soldiers were also overjoyed. Success! The giant ballista that Wang Chong and Zhang Shouji had designed together was actually effective against the behemoth. The moment this giant ballista appeared, it immediately displayed an unimaginable power. This arrow had an unprecedented impact on the distant Uzan, the Western Turks, the Arabs, and everyone else. What is that? When did the Tang dynasty get such a formidable weapon? On the hill, Huashu Wuzong's eyelids twitched violently. Looking at the arrow stuck in the giant beast's head, his heart was in turmoil. Huashu Wuzong was a renowned general of the Uzan Empire, and he had crossed swords with Zhangzhou Jianxiong many times, as well as other generals of the Tang dynasty. However, Huashu Wuzong had never seen such a weapon before. The fact that the Arabian Empire possessed a behemoth army was already surprising enough, but the fact that the Tang dynasty possessed such a terrifying weapon against the behemoths left Huashu Wuzong in shock and astonishment. Although the giant beasts were terrifying, if the Tang dynasty had a large number of these weapons, then even the giant beast army would have nothing to fear. In contrast, the Tang dynasty, which could create weapons to deal with the giant beasts, was more feared and feared. Impossible! When did the Tang dynasty become capable of resisting Arabia? The most shocked of all was the celestial wolf Great General Duwusili. He had been watching from the sidelines this entire time, and no activity had escaped his eyes and ears. When the behemoth had sent Wang Chong flying, Dewussili had believed that the outcome of the battle was already decided. What awaited the Tang dynasty was the complete annihilation of its army and the destruction of its city. He had never imagined that a single arrow from the Tang dynasty would be able to deal such a heavy blow to the behemoth. The originally clear ending suddenly became confusing because of this arrow. Bastard! What's going on here? No one was more shocked than the commander of the behemoth army, Mazel. The behemoths had no natural enemies, and their defenses were so powerful that no human weapon could injure them. Mazel found it hard to accept that one of the behemoths had died here. But what was even harder to accept was that these Eastern infidels were actually able to create weapons that could deal with the behemoth. This time, Abu Muslim and Ziyad, the two highest commanders of the East, did not immediately rebuke Mazel. Even for the two commanders, the arrow that had appeared out of the blue had caused a great impact and shock. Quickly reload. Prepare for the second shot. Chen Bin's voice resounded through the sky in high spirits. Although it had failed to kill the behemoth, the giant ballistae had already proven their value. They were completely capable of dealing a heavy blow to the Arabian behemoth. Awo! Just when the 20-some ballista soldiers were about to load another giant bolt, a roar rang out. At some point, a pair of scarlet eyes had locked onto the ballista soldiers, a look of extreme hatred in them. At almost the same time, a thick baleful aura surged over the ballista soldiers and engulfed them. In an instant, everyone felt a terrifying sense of danger. Not good. The behemoth is aiming at us. Hurry! Reload the ballistae. Everyone, prepare to protect the ballistae. Although that arrow had heavily wounded the scaled behemoth, it had also succeeded in enraging it. With a heaven-shaking roar, the behemoth turned its head and charged at the behemoth. The army was in a state of panic, and even Chen Bin paled. Just as the giant ballistae and the surrounding ballista soldiers were about to fall to the behemoth's hands, everyone heard a massive roar in their ears. Get out of my way! With a flash of light, a huge figure pushed the behemoth out of the defensive line like a mountain of gold and jade. My lord! Marquis! The sight of that familiar figure gave the behemoths a boost in morale. Although Wang Chang's four-armed god had lost 2 arms, it still possessed immense strength. More importantly, the behemoth had suffered one blow after another, and its flame of life was rapidly dimming. It was no longer as ferocious as before. Thud thud thud. Caught off guard, the behemoth lost its balance and was pushed back several steps by Wang Chang's god King Yama, each step causing the earth to quake and all of Talas to quake. Beast! Eat another blow from my cudgel! Wang Chang's furious roar was like a peal of thunder. He swung his cudgel at the behemoth's head, or to put it more accurately, at the giant ballista bolt sticking out of the behemoth's head. The behemoth howled, its body trembling in pain. Half of the ballista bolt had been exposed, but now that Wang Chong had smashed it into the behemoth was once more heavily wounded. And Wang Chong's attacks were far from over. With this wave of attacks, the behemoth's mind was thrown into disarray, and Wang Chong's god King Yama continued to rain down blows. Boom boom boom. In a few short moments, the behemoth's head had suffered 30 to 40 blows. Wonderful! Marquis! 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 Cheers soared into the heavens, and the distant Uzan, Western Turks, and Arabs all grimaced. Release! With Wang Chong fending off the behemoth, Chen Bin and the others became excited. Chen Bin swung down his Wuzi steel sword, and in a flash of light, a second ballista bolt flew through the air, piercing into the behemoth's head. Faster, faster! Chen Bin continued to urge them. With the experience from the first time, the speed at which everyone reloaded was much faster this time. Boom! Immediately after the second huge crossbow, another arrow over 10 meters long struck the giant beast's head with a deafening roar. Wang Chong and the giant ballistae worked closely together. Wang Chong used his cudgel to attack while the giant ballistae fired from the rear. One ballista bolt after another struck the behemoth's head, and with each strike, the behemoth's life energy dimmed a little. Boom! The last volley did not come from Chun Bin and the others, but from the open gate of Talas. At some point, a second giant ballista had been assembled within the city, and had been pushed out of the gate. The commander at the lead was tall and extremely young. It was none other than Suki. The appearance of the two giant ballistae elicited a wave of cheers from the army, and the morale, which had been at rock bottom, instantly soared, even surpassing what it had been before the battle. And when Suki's arrow shot out, the distant behemoth toppled over like a pillar of jade. The fall of the behemoth caused the earth to tremble as if it was unable to endure the enormous force and was on the verge of splitting apart. After enduring 20-some giant ballista bolts, the terrorizer of the Arabian Empire's illustrious body finally lost all of its vitality. Protector General! Protector General! Protector General! Both inside and outside the defense line, including Talas, the cheers of the army could be heard from 100 li away. In the distance, the soldiers of the three empires had nasty grimaces, especially the Arabs. The terrorizer's reputation was like a thunderclap in their ears, and it had destroyed countless cities. No existence had ever been able to pose a true threat to this behemoth, much less kill it. But now it had slumbered here. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would have never dared to believe it. This was undoubtedly an enormous blow to the Arab army. Buzz! Without the slightest hesitation, Wang Chong raised his right foot and strode over the corpse of the terrorizer. Chun Bin, Suki, I'll leave those two giant ballistae to you. Work together and finish off the last behemoth. Wang Chong's voice was still echoing over the defense line, but he had already vanished into the distance. In the distance, Gao Xianji, Qing Qianli, and Wang Yan were engaged in a white-hot battle with the black boar behemoth. The three of them were madly attacking the behemoth, but the behemoth ignored them and continued to attack the city of Talas. The majestic city of Talas was constantly trembling, and the trembling was only getting stronger and stronger.